The Zifu Sea of knowledge before Wang Lin was like a large ball. It was clearly divided in half, one blood red and the other pitch black. The blood red half had to be the blood sea and the pitch black part must be the dead soul sea. While looking at the strange ball in front of him, Wang Lin remembered something. Back then, the fight between the red-haired man and the remains of the ancient god's soul was earth-shattering. They fought to kill each other with the ancient god's body as the battleground. In the end, the ancient god 2C lost because he had already died and only had some of his soul remaining, but he split his sea of knowledge into two. One was the dead soul sea to prevent anyone from getting the inheritance of knowledge, and the other half was the blood sea, made to trap the red-haired man. Witnessing the scene before him, he really admired the likes of Six Desire Devil Lord's master, Sky Devil Magician. That person was a genius to think of using the desire of the ancient god, with the ancient god's bone as a guide, to temporarily open a passage into the dead soul sea to get to the knowledge inheritance. If not for the appearance of the middle-aged man, Sky Devil Magician would have successfully obtained the knowledge inheritance. A thought flashed through Wang Lin's mind. He moved his body forward and charged toward the dead soul sea. The moment his body was near the black area, a black mist suddenly came out and surrounded him, preventing him from moving forward. Wang Lin tried moving to move in other directions, but no matter which way he went, the black fog would appear to block his path. No matter how hard he charged forward, he was unable to get past the black fog. Wang Lin pondered for a while. He slammed his bag of holding and drank a few big gulps of liquid spiritual energy, then he sat cross-legged and started to cultivate. His eyes revealed a cold look as his hand formed different techniques in front of him. Soon, countless illusionary circles appeared around him. His eyes grew brighter and brighter, and his hands moved faster and faster. The restriction illusionary circles started to increase. After a long time, his hand suddenly stopped and pressed forward. The illusionary circles formed countless rings and quickly spread in all directions. Soon after, Wang Lin stood up. He placed his right hand on his chest and his left hand on his right shoulder. Both hands seemed to be performing strange seals while both his legs moved him forward slowly. Suddenly, a black snake appeared from where he had stepped. It quickly climbed up his body until it split into two at his chest. The black snake followed along his arms and arrived at each of the strange seals that both of his hands had formed. In an instant, a skull-sized ball with many tentacles attached to it appeared in front of Wang Lin. Wang Lin roared lowly, "Ancient God, break!" His eyes became cold and threw both of his hands to his sides. The black sphere charged forward like lightning, quickly catching up to the illusionary circles as it charged at the black fog. This ancient god break was the only technique that Wang Lin could use after reading the ancient god tactic. The power of this technique wasn't for attack, but to use a large amount of spiritual energy to break all restrictions. The liquid spiritual energy Wang Lin drank earlier was turned into that black sphere by the ancient god break technique. At the same time, Wang Lin charged forward like a meteor. The first thing that touched the black fog was Wang Lin's illusionary circles. The moment they touched it, it was like hot iron touching snow. The fog quickly melted away. But the moment the fog dissipated, more fog came to replace it. From the looks of it, instead of the fog decreasing, it seemed to be increasing, forming even thicker layers of fog. After the illusionary circle was the black sphere that was created by the ancient god break technique. On this sphere were countless flaming tentacles, and the moment they touched the fog would shatter. The moment it shattered, waves of pressure would explode outward in all directions. As a result, in this dense fog, a deep gap was opened. Looking at the gap from outside, it seemed to be endless. Wang Lin used that opportunity and quickly flew into the gap. After the four waves pushed outward, they would quickly get overwhelmed by black fog. Gradually, as the waves couldn't handle the pressure anymore, they started to shrink, and as a result, the gap got smaller. Soon, the gap closed due to the waves collapsing. Wang Lin's speed was very fast. He quickly charged toward the shrinking gap. Although he saw the gap visibly shrinking, he knew that now was not the time to be backing down. Even if there was only a small possibility, Wang Lin didn't want to give up his plan. Seeing that the waves around him had shrunk and that the end still wasn't in sight, a thought flashed through his mind. He drank another gulp of liquid spiritual energy. Both of his hands formed a seal and he muttered some chants. After releasing his hand, Another black sphere appeared. He took the sphere and threw it to the side. The sphere broke and the surrounding waves seemed to gain a second life and started to push outward again. Time was of the essence. The burden on his body was great every time he used the ancient God break technique. If it was only 3 times, the harm on his body wasn't great, but more than 3 would cause him great harm before he mastered the ancient God tactics. The ancient God break technique was based on the ancient God tactics, but right now Wang Lin was just using spiritual energy to get by. He continued to move forward. As the wave couldn't stand the pressure of the fog anymore again and started to shrink, Wang Lin finally reached the end of the fog. After a quick glance behind him, Wang Lin let out a bitter laugh, then turned around to leave. At the bottom of the fog was a continuous layer of purple lightning. If he carelessly entered, he was bound to die. Also, below the layer of purple lightning he saw a black sea. Within the black sea's roaring water were creatures that looked like dragons, but weren't dragons, that stared at Wang Lin through the layers of purple lightning. This was not a place that Wang Lin could enter by force. It seemed that before he even entered the Dead Soul Sea, he would die. Wang Lin had a very decisive personality. The moment he saw something was wrong, he backed off. The wave started to collapse. The moment before the gap was about to be sealed, he charged out. He stared back at the black fog. His face was gloomy and uncertain. If he couldn't enter the Dead Soul Sea, then he wouldn't be able to leave the ancient god's body. But with his current strength, entering the Dead Soul Sea was impossible. Even the likes of 6 Devil Magician wouldn't be able to enter the Dead Soul Sea. The only person that could enter was the person who inherited the ancient god's power. Wang Lin pondered as he stared at the other half of the huge sphere, the Blood Sea. This was the place the red-haired man was trapped in. If he could break free, then entering the Dead Soul Sea was easy. It could be said that this man's chances of breaking into the Dead Soul Sea were much higher than Wang Lin's. After all, within the Dead Soul Sea contained the inheritance of knowledge. If the red-haired man obtained it, then he would have obtained both inheritances and would immediately become an ancient god. Wang Lin stared at the Blood Sea, his mouth gradually revealing a small smile. He thought about the events that had occurred earlier. Because Wang Lin was a soul devourer that all those demonic cultivators were crazily searching for him. Then for what reason were they searching for him? He thought back to what happened before, when he met the large wandering soul that was about to become a soul devourer. The appearance of such a large wandering soul was not normal. As a soul devourer, Wang Lin knew that, in the decaying world, the soul devourers had very clear boundaries between territories. If a wandering soul was about to evolve into a soul devourer would stop the evolution by devouring that wandering soul. Unless there was no soul devourer nearby, would a wandering soul be able to evolve successfully? Because there was already a soul devourer in the 3rd realm, such a large wandering soul should not exist. It was very likely that under some special circumstances with the help of external forces, this was possible. Especially considering that the soul devourer seemed to be in a strange state, as if it was sleeping, not aware of its surroundings. Wang Lin knew the answer. The sleeping state of the soul devourer was caused by someone. The purpose was to allow other wandering souls to evolve into soul devourers. It revealed that the other party had some grand scheme. This plan required 2 soul devourers to complete. This was the only reason to explain why the moment they realized Wang Lin was a soul devourer, all those demonic cultivators started to search for him as if they were crazy. According to Wang Lin's observation, for that wandering soul to become a soul devourer would still require a long time. A thought flashed through Wang Lin's mind. The last question he had was, who was all these demonic cultivators working for? Hunchback Meng was able to come back from the dead. There must be some shocking secret behind it all. Also, the capture of Duanmu and Wang Qingyue. The more Wang Lin analyzed the situation, the more he started to grasp the grand picture. He felt like he had almost seen through the mysteries. Wang Lin stared at the Blood Sea. His expression was calm. Someone within the ancient god's body who has the power to control all these demonic cultivators must be the person who inherited the ancient god's power. It must be the red-haired man trapped in the Blood Sea. If it really was that person, then the reason why they wanted to soul devour was clear. Besides leaving the Blood Sea, Wang Lin couldn't think of any other reason. Wang Lin pondered a little. A cold look flashed through his eyes. He looked at the blood sea again as he held his finger to his brow. His body started to turn transparent as he entered the heaven-defying bead space. In the heaven-defying bead space, Wang Lin looked at Situnan and his parents, then sat down where there were few floating lights. Since he had entered the core formation stage, he was no longer restricted from bringing items with spiritual energy into the heaven-defying bead space. This was a very clear change in the bead. Wang Lin decided that unless it was his last resort, he wasn't going to look for the red-haired man to open up the Dead Soul Sea. Now that he had the ancient god tactic and have many treasures to help increase his cultivation, he decided to go into closed-door training to attempt to reach the nascent soul stage. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and focused his divine sense on the 3 big words left in his brain. Gradually, complex techniques appeared one by one in his heart. The first layer of the ancient god tactic contained 3 parts: stealing spiritual energy, swallowing spiritual energy, and melting spiritual energy. The moment each ancient god was born, their body would automatically use the first technique. But as the ancient god grew up to a child, the first layer would cultivate to the melting spiritual energy stage. If the ancient god broke into the second layer, he could absorb the planet's energy. If this was not achieved, then the baby would keep sleeping. Once a certain amount of time passed, the golden liquid surrounding the baby would disappear. After losing the protection that prevented people from detecting him, the only road left was to be found and devoured by others. After studying the first technique for a very long time, Wang Lin let out a breath and opened both his eyes, revealing a contemplative look. After studying this technique, Wang Lin understood one of the reasons why the ancient god's body was so large. Ancient gods focused on training their bodies and rarely used weapons. It could even be said that their bodies were the best treasures. Their body's hardness could compare to the best treasures in the world. The focus of the ancient god's tactic was to use all of the spiritual energy that one steals to reinforce the body. Once the limit of the body is reached, one must expand the body, or else their cultivation would stop. The larger the body becomes, the more spiritual energy the body requires. After reaching a certain size, the ancient god would experience body reconstruction. This was processed to increase the quality of the body. To an ancient god, the more times their bodies experience reconstruction, the stronger their cultivation and bodies become. Also, with every reconstruction, their souls would also become larger. Among the ancient gods, there were no cultivation levels like in the world of cultivators. The ancient gods' cultivation was mainly just their soul and their body. The body was the weapon and the soul was the hand that controlled the weapon, combining into the almost invincible ancient god family. In ancient times, the ancient gods were glorious, but in the end were still buried in history. As of today, they have disappeared without a trace besides a few mentions in some ancient texts. Wang Lin realized that, by using the ancient god tactic, he could use the spiritual energy that he's stolen to raise his cultivation. This would allow him to increase his cultivation quickly. He took out his bag of holding. After searching for a while, he took out an object. It was a dantian. It was obtained when he went on a killing spree. This dantian contained all the cultivation of a middle-tier cultivators. Without a word, Wang Lin threw the dantian into his mouth. The moment the dantian entered his mouth, it released tons of spiritual energy into his body. Wang Lin immediately used the spiritual energy stealing technique of the first layer of the ancient god tactic. Then he put his hands together and sat down to cultivate. All the spiritual energy was quickly absorbed by the spiritual energy stealing technique. But the moment it was about to be fused into this body, Wang Lin stopped it and moved all the spiritual energy into the core in his body. Waves of spiritual energy surged in his core, forming patterns. A hurricane passed through his body. The spiritual energy that took it 2 hours to gather disappeared in an instant. If Wang Lin didn't have the spiritual energy stealing technique, he would need to spend anywhere from several months to several years of time to digest the dantian, and he would only be able to absorb 70 to 80% of it while the remaining would be lost. Although time moved faster in the heaven-defying bead space, it would still waste a lot of time. However, in what was only an instant in the real world, he was able to completely absorb the dantian. His core spun in a pattern, sending out waves of spiritual energy to his body. Wang Lin's eyes glistened. A single dantian allowed him to reach the peak of the mid-stage of core formation, one step away from the late stage. Wang Lin's right hand moved toward his bag of holding and took out bottles of immortal pills made by Li Muan. He started to put them into his mouth one by one. Time flew by really quickly. The moment a pill was consumed, the spiritual energy stealing technique would completely absorb it. Right before the spiritual energy entered this body, Wang Lin would redirect it toward his core. As a result, his cultivation quickly increased as he broke through the mid-stage of core formaten into the late stage. Next, Wang Lin took out the most valuable object in his bag of holding, the spinal liquid that he obtained from the dragon in the tunnel. The spinal liquid from the dragon was only enough to fill a small bottle. One could see how precious it was. This was the most precious drug Wang Lin had obtained so far. After hesitating, he opened up the bottle. After drinking a gulp, his body released a burning heat. The spiritual energy stealing technique activated and quickly circulated the spiritual energy. Time slowly passed. Wang Lin could clearly feel his core become larger, its color more bright, and its spinning even faster. After the gulp of spinal liquid was absorbed, Wang Lin took another. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, until a month later, Wang Lin had been closed-eye cultivating the entire time. The spiritual energy stealing technique was constantly active in his body. There were only 10 drops of the spinal liquid left. The core in his body was about the size of 2 fists. Its color was golden with faint glow of red. Every time it spun, the meridians in his body would ache, but he still hadn't broken into the nascent soul stage. A month ago, Wang Lin took a pill that would increase the chances of his nascent soul forming, but the pill only turned the core red, with no sign of it breaking and forming a nascent soul. After pondering for a while, Wang Lin let out a sigh. He wondered if others had this much difficulty forming their nascent soul, but it seemed it was a lot harder than he had imagined. He was running low on pills in his bag of holding, and there wasn't much liquid spiritual energy left. After pondering for a while, he arrived at where Situ Nan and his parents were. He kowtowed a few times in front of his parents, then pointed his finger to his brow and left the heaven-defying beads space. Outside the Sea of Knowledge, Wang Lin's body went from an illusionary form to more and more solid one. He stared at the Sea of Knowledge and let out a sigh. Based on his plans before, if he was lucky enough to enter the nascent soul stage, then he might have a chance to enter the Dead Soul Sea. Perhaps the moment he gained the inheritance, he would be able to leave the ancient god's body. But now he wasn't confident. After pondering for a while, Wang Lin raised his hand and a cold look appeared in his eyes. Now there was only one road left. If he didn't want to be trapped here, always avoiding the pursuit of the demonic cultivators forever, there was only one way. His right hand grabbed at the void, created a rift and entered it. After coming out, he left the Sea of Knowledge and arrived somewhere within the Qi Sea. After he appeared, he hesitated. Both of his hands came together and sent out a few rays of light in all directions, creating many rifts. As the rifts were sealed up, he spread out his divine sense in all directions. As a result, the demonic cultivators that had been bitterly looking for him noticed his presence and quickly charged toward him. Soon the demonic cultivators appeared near Wang Lin, one by one. They stared at Wang Lin, revealing smiles. One of them was Hunchback Meng. After he saw Wang Lin, that feeling of disgust appeared. Without a word, his right hand reached out to grab Wang Lin. Wang Lin's expression was normal, and he was very calm. As Hunchback Meng reached toward him, he sneered, "Don't you want to break the seal on your master?" The moment Wang Lin said those words, although all the surrounding demonic cultivators' expressions remained normal, their eyes were filled with surprise. Hunchback Meng was stunned and he stopped his right hand. Wang Lin noticed this pause. He confirmed now that what he guessed was correct. Now the only thing he needed to confirm was that their master was the red-haired man trapped in the Blood Sea. Hunchback Meng's face was gloomy and showed uncertainty. He let out a cold snort and his right hand grabbed toward Wang Lin even faster. Wang Lin wore a steely expression. He didn't move an inch. He had already set up traps here ahead of time. If anyone tries to catch him, the nearby rift would quickly tear open and bring him away from this place. After all, they were in the ancient god's body, and no one was more familiar with this place than him. His eyes were calm. If Meng made a move and none of the other demonic cultivators intervened, his prediction was wrong. They don't care if the soul devourer was dead or alive. The moment Hunchback Meng's hand was about to catch Wang Lin, a cold voice suddenly resounded. "Stop!" The moment the voice was heard, Hunchback Meng felt like he was being held by an invisible hand and was thrown back. He stopped after spitting out a few mouthfuls of black blood, then kneeled on the ground. There wasn't any resentment in his face. He respectfully said, "Greetings, Lord Duomu." Meanwhile, all the other demonic cultivators kneeled down. The middle-aged man that had destroyed Sky Devil Magician's plan appeared before Wang Lin, staring at him with a cold expression. Wang Lin's expression was calm as he replied, "You really are a soul devourer. Very good, follow me." After the middle-aged man finished speaking, he waved his hand in the void and a rift hundreds of feet wide appeared in the sky. He glanced at Wang Lin, then floated into the rift. Wang Lin stayed silent and entered the rift as well. Behind them, all the demonic cultivators followed suit. But right as they were about to enter the crack, it started to close up. In the blink of an eye, the rift disappeared without a trace. Besides Wang Lin and Domu, no one else entered. As the rift folded, what appeared before Wang Lin wasn't the blood sea he expected, but a space illuminated by a dark purple light. This space wasn't large, only about 100 feet in each direction. Floating in the four corners were some strangely shaped instruments. Waves of gentle light emitted from them. Next to each instrument sat a cultivator, each one cultivating next to an instrument. Their figures looked like Domus. They kept their human forms and didn't turn into demons. Wang Lin scanned the area and counted a total of 9 people, all cultivating in the room. The moment the two entered, all the cultivators opened up their eyes. One by one, they activated multiple techniques on each of the instruments, causing purple light to shine from them. Domu turned around. His unblinking eyes were fixated on Wang Lin. Wang Lin took a few steps back. His pupils suddenly contracted. He placed his right hand near his bag of holding as he stared at the person in front of him. This was very different from what he expected. One of the 9 cultivators said, "Domu, we can't support this for long, 3 hours at the most. Quickly explain everything." Golden light shot out of Domu's eyes while he stared at Wang Lin. He said, "Little guy, you managed to disappear. Why did you appear again?" Wang Lin frowned. He stared at Domu. Right as he was about to speak, his left hand formed a seal. His left hand swiped behind him using the heaven technique, which he learned from the ancient god tactic. It allowed him to go anywhere in the ancient god's body. The moment the rift appeared before Wang Lin, a purple light shot out from one of the instruments and destroyed it. Domu's expression was calm. There was no hint of emotion. Wang Lin's heart sank. He stared at Domu and slowly said, "To leave the land of the ancient god." A tall red-faced cultivator said, frowning, "Domu, you always say things too slowly. Little guy, let me tell you. The moment the seal on XIAN is removed, everyone here will die. He is the only person who will leave." Back then, 11 of us arrived on this wild planet. We originally planned to create a residence here, but we didn't expect to find that this place contained spiritual energy of the ancient god. After I investigated a bit, I met a cultivator named XIAN outside of the ancient god's body. This person's cultivation was very strong. Even with all of us working together, we weren't a match for him. The red-haired old man's voice grew louder. He talked very quickly. As soon as he finished speaking, another cultivator raised his head and gloomily said, "This XIAN didn't kill us, but invited us to enter this land of the ancient god." This person understood the land of the ancient god very well. He had a perfect handle on the 3 realms. According to him, he had been in the land of the ancient god for a long time, but sadly, he was blocked by the door of the last level. He invited us to help him break through the last level. Although the chance of an inheritance was low, the temptation was too great. Although we couldn't beat him, we knew of a formation that once activated could defeat even him. Only, after using this formation, we would lose a lot of our cultivation. The trip into the ancient god's body that person schemed was deep, but we were not people that were easily messed with. We were prepared for him. In the end, we eventually cleared the last level, but all of it seemed too strange. The last level was clearly a seal, and its power was great. It took us a very long time to get past it. It seemed the ancient god used it to seal something away. If it wasn't for that person understanding the seal so well, even if the method to break the seal was given to us, we weren't sure we could break it. After the seal was broken, we could tell that the person named Ta-san changed, but couldn't tell what about him changed. We successfully entered the ancient god's body. Ancient God 2C really was a genius. He really did leave behind an inheritance. In the Chi-C we saw the inheritance of power, but before we could even fight for it, it disappeared before our eyes. It was taken by Ta Senior. After that person obtained the inheritance of the ancient god's power, he suddenly started to laugh hysterically. But at the same time within the Chi-C, a giant appeared and started a huge battle with him. Then an even more strange thing occurred. That person knew all of the giant's techniques. In the end, the giant lost and split into two. One half formed the Dead Soul Sea, and the other started a very powerful divine technique. That person was clearly unfamiliar with the technique. I remember that he said, "There is nothing you know that I don't." But this divine technique, he clearly didn't know it. The ancient god's soul split into thousands of pieces and entered that man's body, forming thousands of seals on his body, before imprisoning him in the blood sea. We thought everything was over and didn't dare to stay any longer, so we all quickly left. But the nightmare had only just started. Only one of us 11 managed to successfully leave this place. The rest of us were grabbed by demonic hands that reached out from rifts that appeared into the blood sea. Ta-sun was too scary. He immediately thought of a way to break the thousands of seals on his body. Each seal was basically a fragment of the ancient god 2C's soul. He forcibly took some fragments and inserted them into us. In the countless years, every few thousand years, there would be a few cultivators that arrived here. They were all captured by him and had part of the seal embedded in them. Even though many people came together, he would always allow one lucky person to leave. This was so more people could come in the future. As there were more and more cultivators, the seals on Ta-san decreased. The good thing was that the later cultivators were different from us. Their cultivation was low, so they couldn't fuse with the fragments of the ancient god's soul. Many cultivators could only handle one seal on their body, so the process of Ta-san's seal removal became slower and slower. But he really was a genius. After seeing that his method was slowing down, he came up with another idea: the soul devourer. Before this, we didn't even know what kind of creature a soul devourer was, but Ta-san seemed to know. He sent us demonic cultivators to go catch a soul devourer to devour the soul fragments within his body. This method was very effective, but after the soul devourer devoured a certain amount he would need to sleep. That method didn't achieve Ta-san's desired result, so he came up with the idea of raising his own soul devourer. So he helped Lord Shurja, who was a wandering soul, to grow toward becoming a soul devourer. Originally, for Lord Shurja to become a soul devourer, it would take a very long time, but now that you appeared, everything has changed. Each of the 10 people, besides a wrinkly-faced old man that looked like he had just crawled out of a grave, narrated part of that story. This caused Wang Lin to be very surprised, but he didn't believe it all. There is still one very important point that we are still wondering about. That is the identity of Ta-Senator. Why is he so familiar with the ancient god's body? After observing him for countless years, we guessed that Ta-san isn't human like us, but a demon formed from the resentment of the dying body of the ancient god. That last sentence was said by Domu. His expression was calm. If Wang Lin obtained the complete inheritance of knowledge, he would know if all of this was true or false, but now, after hearing such a scary idea, he couldn't help but change his expression. Only this can explain why when he invited us to enter the ancient god's body all those years ago, he was so familiar with the place, and why we felt that had he changed after we broke the seal. That seal was clearly one that us cultivators use to seal away demons when they enter our bodies. This would also explain why all the techniques used by the giant were known by Ta-Senator. After all, just obtaining the inheritance of power is pointless. Only after obtaining both inheritances would one have the power of the ancient god. All this speculation only pointed to one thing. That person is either the ancient god 2C or the demon god 2C. As Domu's words sank in, Wang Lin sucked in a breath. A thought flashed through his head, but he stayed silent. I really don't need to cheat you. If you charge into the blood sea, you'll become a tool just like the soul devourer in the third realm. And once the seal is broken, you will die. Wang Lin silently pondered for a while, then he sneered. Death? I assume that by death you mean when my soul dissipates. If the story you guys told is true, when that person is free, won't he just take the soul fragments back? Donghua's group stayed silent. Among the 10 people, the old man who hadn't said a word let out a light cough. He said in a gentle tone, "Fellow cultivator is indeed smart. Once XIAN obtains the inheritance of knowledge, he will retrieve the soul fragments in our bodies to allow his soul be to complete again. In all these years, the soul fragments have fused with our souls. To take them back would be the same as devouring our souls. Friend, helping us is helping yourself. However, I won't ask you to help for free. If you agree, I'll have a gift for you." Wang Lin didn't accept. He secretly considered how credible the things these people said were. Donghua gave Wang Lin a cold glance and said, "Junior, don't think we have to rely on you. We could always just kill you to avoid any trouble in the future." A dark-faced cultivator sneered. "Time is almost up, and what was needed to be said has been said. Since this kid continues to be so thick-headed, I might as well lay down a restriction. Although it could create some inconveniences, it would make controlling him a lot easier." After Wang Lin heard this, he thought of a sarcastic remark. If such a restriction could actually work, these old guys wouldn't spend so much time talking to him. The moment he appeared, they would have used the restriction to control him. Wang Lin mulled over it a little, and guess why they didn't use the restriction? It seemed no restriction would go unnoticed by the red-haired man. These people's purpose couldn't be this simple. Like Sky Devil Magician, they must have had their own hidden plans. Wang Lin calmly said, "What do you guys want me to do?" The old man full of wrinkles heard what Wang Lin said and his heart skipped a beat. This person didn't ask what the reward was but first asked what the task was. It seemed that this person was extremely calm and wouldn't be easily moved. The old man slowly said, "Enter the Blood Sea. After XIAN removes the seal, he will directly enter the Dead Soul Sea. Once he opens up the Dead Soul Sea, you must enter the Dead Soul Sea and use a technique. It's that easy. As for what technique, it's the sealing technique the giant formed by the ancient god soul used. I studied that technique for countless years and have a 30% success rate. If you use it, you have a 70% chance of succeeding because you are a soul devourer. All the soul fragments you absorb will listen to you." Wang Lin sneered. He gloomily said, "With my cultivation of only core formation, it is but a dream to seal XIAN." The old man let out a laugh and said, "Of course, we aren't letting you perform the seal, but we'll let you control the soul fragments which will trigger the Dead Soul Sea again. Based on my predictions, the Dead Soul Sea will seal up again and completely seal XIAN within. If you agree, it doesn't matter if it succeeds or not, I'll give you a gift. I obtained this object after much hardship. After searching many ancient texts, I finally found the name of this object. It's Huan Yuan Beast Trap. Any animal in the world could be controlled by it for a short period of time, but its origin is unknown. In theory, if you have enough spiritual energy, even immortal beasts, if trapped by the circle, could be used by you. But when using this circle, the stronger the beast trapped within, the more spiritual energy it requires, and if you want to trap an immortal beast, then the amount of spiritual energy it requires is unimaginable. When I received it all those years ago, I tried it once but failed. However, before I could try a second time, I had already been trapped here." Wang Lin's expression was mostly normal, but he soon revealed a cold smile and snorted. Donghua's eyes grew cold. When he was about to speak, he was stopped by the old man. The old man stared at Wang Lin and slowly said, "This Huan Yuan Beast Trap is a legendary treasure. If you are still not satisfied, I don't have anything better." Wang Lin's expression was calm. He stared at the instruments that surround him and didn't say a word. The old man pondered a little and said, "This is my life-saving treasure. I can't give it to you. I can give you 10 top-quality sprite stones. That is as much as we can give." Wang Lin didn't feel the need to push them too far. The fact was that these people's cultivation was at an unimaginable level. If he didn't have the inheritance memory as his ace in the hole, he wouldn't be this calm. Wang Lin calmly said, 100 pieces. Without waiting for the old man to reply, Donghua said, "No way." The other people's gazes also became cold. Wang Lin wasn't intimidated. He simply waited for the old man to reply. The old man hesitated and gloomily said, 20 pieces. This is my limit. We don't have many of these top-quality spirit stones. If you still don't agree, then we have to use different methods." Wang Lin's expression remained the same. Without a word, he stretched out his right hand. The old man pointed at his chest. A black snake slithered by. I think the snake was inside his clothes, and a normal-looking copper ring appeared in his hand. He threw the copper ring and Wang Lin caught it. Wang Lin glanced at the copper ring. It was the size of a bracelet and had engravings of many fearsome beasts. These fearsome beasts felt very alive, as if they were real. Wang Lin sent out his divine sense. Just as he entered the ring, he heard waves of beast growls. His divine sense couldn't help but shake, so he quickly withdrew it. Wang Lin put away the copper ring without any change in his expression. He then looked at the old man. In the old man's hand appeared a gray bag of holding. He tossed it at Wang Lin. Wang Lin looked into the bag and saw 20 neatly placed top-quality spirit stones. Waves of spirit energy came from the bag. After placing the top-quality spirit stones into his own bag of holding, he threw the gray bag of holding to the ground and heavily said, "I have one more question. After I seal the Master of the Blood Sea, how do I leave this place?" After the old man heard Wang Lin's question, his heart relaxed a bit. He had always been waiting for Wang Lin to ask that question. If Wang Lin didn't ask that question, he would be suspicious. "It's very easy. After Ta Sun is sealed again, I will want to leave this place as well. The key is to be inside the Dead Soul Sea. Since you will be there with us, you will be able to leave as well." Wang Lin sneered in his mind. He was now convinced that their goal was the inheritance of knowledge in the Dead Soul Sea, if what they just said was true, that is. Wang Lin revealed a cold look. He slowly said, "It's not that I don't believe you, but this matter is very important. If I can't be 100% sure that I can leave this place, then all of this is just empty talk." The old man frowned and said, "Since this old man promised you, I would never go back on my promise." Wang Lin didn't move. He shook his head and said, "Senior is a master, and junior should believe you, but this is a matter of life and death. If this junior can't be sure, even if we come to an agreement, it would be hard for me to fully devote myself to this." Domu snorted, revealing killing intent, and said, "Junior, talking in such a roundabout way is really annoying. And I already promised you. If you don't believe it, don't be so difficult. Let me send you to hell to ease my mind." He suddenly waved his right hand and created a black hand that slammed toward Wang Lin. Wang Lin's gaze became cold. He didn't even look at the giant hand and stared at the old man. The giant hand stopped 3 inches from Wang Lin's head. The old man waved his hand and Domu took back the giant hand. The old man frowned as he gave Domu a look and slowly said, "What do you want?" Wang Lin looked at the surrounding instruments and said, "Since these instruments are your life-saving treasures, how about giving them to this junior to hold? Once we leave this place, junior will naturally return them. I believe seniors don't have to worry about a junior like me, who is only at the core formation stage, to take these treasures for my own." The old man looked at Wang Lin. After pondering for a long time, he revealed a cold smile and nodded his head. He waved his hand and the 10 instruments flew to his hand. After placing some seals on them, he tossed them to Wang Lin. Without a word, Wang Lin took out another bag of holding and placed the 10 instruments inside, then carefully put the bag away. The space started to dissipate without the power of the 10 instruments. The old man gave Wang Lin a look and waved his hand as he opened up a rift. He stepped back to get out of the way. Wang Lin's expression was calm as he entered the rift. After Wang Lin entered, Domu had an unwilling expression. He said, "Big brother, you shut up." The old man's expression changed. It was no longer as calm as it was when talking to Wang Lin, but filled with anger. He stared at Domu and entered the rift. The others beside Domu entered the rift one by one. The last person was the man that always had a dark expression. When he was about to enter the rift, he said, "Domu, do you still not understand? That little brat knows every detail of our plan. He knows that we need him alive. What you did earlier was simply humiliating yourself. I'm depending on this brat for my wish to come true." Big brother also waited a very long time for this. If everyone wasn't so devoted to Ta Sun, things wouldn't be this difficult. After he finished speaking, he stepped into the rift. Domu pondered a little and followed him in. After entering the rift, what appeared before Wang Lin was a blood-colored world. There were many eye-catching stone pillars, especially the one that seemed to enter the heavens. Seeing this caused Wang Lin's pupils to shrink. This place was really the Blood Sea. Wang Lin's gaze fell on the man at the top of the pillar that rose to the heavens. The man had blood-red hair. There was an air of arrogance spreading from the man. After one look, Wang Lin felt like he couldn't even breathe. At that moment, the other demonic cultivators all returned, including Domu's group. After they entered the Blood Sea, they all sat down on different stone pillars. The demonic cultivators all found their pillars, sat down and stared at Wang Lin. They all sat cross-legged. Wang Lin was the only person floating in the air. Wang Lin's gaze swept the area. There were many cultivators, at least 1,000. Among these people, he saw Hunchback Meng, Duamaji, Wang Qingyue, Sky Devil Magician. In that moment, in the space next to the red-haired man, appeared a rift. A tall man walked out. The moment he appeared, he looked at Wang Lin and revealed a look of ecstasy. He said to the red-haired man, "Master, he is the soul devourer." Then he sat down at a stone pillar nearby. Wang Lin noticed at a glance that that person was the huge wandering soul. The surroundings were completely silent, until a hoarse voice suddenly came from the red-haired man. "Soul devourer!" He suddenly raised his head and the whole Blood Sea shook. The surrounding pillars sprayed out countless amounts of blood. The entire world was covered in blood after that. His eyes felt as if they possessed limitless power. His gaze gave off a demonic feeling as he stared at Wang Lin. Wang Lin suddenly felt that the moment the red-haired man gazed at him, an invisible restriction started to activate near him. He suddenly became unable to move his body. "Absorb this piece of the soul and unlock this seal for me or die." After the red-haired man finished speaking, he grabbed at his brow. His face revealed a painful expression. His body trembled as he pulled out a red light from his body. The blood-red light floated before Wang Lin. After taking out the red light, the red-haired man let out a few heavy breaths. It took him a long time before his breathing returned to normal. The surrounding demonic cultivators all stared at the red light, revealing a mixed look of fear and envy. The red-haired man's body trembled. He stared at Wang Lin through his messy hair. Wang Lin was surprised, but his expression was calm. He calmly said, "I can help you, but once you break out of the seal, you must help me leave." The red-haired man's mouth moved slightly and he nodded his head. Wang Lin cautiously looked at the red-haired man. Suddenly, his G-realm soul leapt out, formed a large mouth and swallowed the red light. A feeling of intense pain suddenly arose in his soul and his body trembled. After a long time, the pain disappeared. He checked his soul and noticed that it was twice its original size. The reason he dared to boldly show his face was because the inheritance of power and inheritance of knowledge were very different from each other, so there wouldn't be any chance of it being noticed unless the same inheritance was inherited by two people. This way, besides Wang Lin himself, no one would know that he had received part of the inheritance. As for the red light, Wang Li heard from Domu's group that it was part of the ancient god's soul. If it was someone else, they would fear it due to lacking the ability to control it, but as a soul devourer, he could devour it for himself. After seeing that the soul fragment was devoured, the red-haired man stared at Wang Lin with a cold gaze. After a long time, he said, "Even though you are a soul devourer, you haven't formed your soul gem yet. However, the fact that you can forcibly devour a soul fragment is very satisfactory. Wandering soul, help him form his soul gem." The man formed by the wandering soul's body trembled. He hesitated but quickly became determined and whispered, "As you wish." He pointed his hand at his brow. His body involuntarily trembled. He clearly became a lot weaker. At the same time, a see-through sparkling red ball appeared from his brow. The moment the red ball appeared, his body collapsed into his wandering soul form as he wasn't able to keep his form any longer. After a long time, he slowly condensed into his human form again. Without a word, his G-realm soul quickly went out and surrounded the light ball. The ball contained the huge wandering soul's soul energy. Wang Lin was able to absorb it without any hindrance. After half an hour, he was able to completely absorb it all. Wang Lin could clearly feel that his soul suddenly grew several sizes. The red-haired man pondered a little and slowly said, Wandering soul, continue. The wandering soul let out a wry laugh. He didn't think that Wang Lin as a soul devourer wouldn't have a soul gem. If he had known, he wouldn't have told his master. That would keep himself from entering into his current sorry state. Also, this soul devourer was really something. Even with one soul ball, it didn't seem to be enough to let him form a soul gem. A soul gem was something soul devourers gradually formed as they reached a certain stage and devoured a certain number of souls. It was something they naturally formed for their core. Generally speaking, most soul devourers would devour massive amounts of souls the moment they evolved into a soul devourer in order to form their soul gem as soon as possible. Almost no soul devourer would wait so long to form their soul gem. The difference between a soul devourer with and without a soul gem was that a soul devourer with a soul gem could create wandering souls. The wandering soul let out a bitter laugh. He pointed his hand at his brow and another soul ball appeared. His body collapsed again. This time he could no longer form his human body again. After a long time, a red ball appeared from his wandering soul form. This time his breath became ragged. Although he was still stronger than the normal wandering soul, the difference from before was too great. Wang Lin's eyes lit up. He sent out his soul to surround the ball and started absorbing it. This time he could clearly feel a difference. His soul no longer grew, but inside him, a particle the size of a grain of rice started to condense. The red-haired man frowned. If a soul devourer didn't have a soul gem, they wouldn't be able to handle too many soul fragments. But after this person absorbed 2 soul balls, he only reached the first step of forming his soul gem. Those 2 soul balls made up most of the soul energy that the wandering soul had. The red-haired man pondered a little. A thought flashed through his head. He reached out his right hand and lifted the wandering soul. The wandering soul let out a miserable scream. His body quickly shrank and condensed into a soul ball. The red-haired man grabbed the soul ball and threw it at Wang Lin. This soul ball was formed from the life of the wandering soul. After consuming the soul ball, Wang Lin felt the rice grain-sized particle quickly grow larger. It soon grew to the size of a thumb. Suddenly, a strange feeling entered Wang Lin's mind. His G-realm soul suddenly shrank and fused into the fingernail-sized ball. As for the ball, it disappeared into his brow. Wang Lin's eyes blinked. As of that moment, he was a real soul devourer, with the ability to produce wandering souls. All of that knowledge appeared, as if it were an inheritance, when his soul gem was formed. The red-haired man retrieved his gaze. He waved his right hand and a rift appeared in midair. Next he quickly grabbed with his hand. The entire blood sea shook and a huge illusionary figure appeared from the rift. The moment the figure appeared, Wang Lin suddenly felt the aura of a soul devourer. This figure was clearly the soul devourer from the 3rd realm. Soon, the whole illusionary figure appeared like a cloud and came through the rift, revealing its whole body. The red-haired man's eyes lit up. His body trembled as traces of blood-red light started to release from his body. Waves of blood mist sprouted from his body. Almost immediately, his entire body was covered by the blood mist. He seemed to be enduring unimaginable pain. After a long time, he raised his head, revealing a bloody face. He said with a husky voice, "Come out, 2C's soul fragments." The moment his voice came out, countless red lights were forced out of his body. There were countless red lights, and as they appeared, they started to circle like a red tornado. The red lights contained a demonic aura. The surrounding demonic cultivators all bowed their heads in fear. All except for Domu's group, who looked at the red light with dark expressions. The shadow formed by the soul devourer formed a mouth. The mouth became larger and larger as it stretched outward. It closed in front of the red-haired man. Dozens of red lights were consumed by it. But at the same time, the rest of the right lights suddenly started to flash brightly and circle the red-haired man as if they were crazy. As they circled the red-haired man, symbols would appear and land on the red-haired man. Every time one landed, his body would tremble. Meanwhile, following his trembles, dozens of red lights appeared from the blood sea to replace the ones devoured by the soul devourer and circled around the red-haired man. As for the soul devourer, after devouring 10 more soul fragments, its cloud-like body started to glow red. It clearly needed time to digest and couldn't continue to devour more. The red-haired man revealed a painful expression as he looked toward Wang Lin. Wang Lin now understood why this required 2 soul devourers. If there was only 1 soul devourer, more soul fragments will appear from the blood sea before they finish digesting. This way, not only would it not remove the seal, but would increase the amount of soul fragments. There needed to be a buffer time. Only with 2 soul devourers taking turns devouring the soul fragments would it be possible? Even then, the possibility was low. Wang Lin's eyes lit up. The thumbnail-sized soul gem appeared in front of his brow. His G-realm soul quickly came out as well and circled the red-haired man. He immediately devoured more than 10 red lights that were floating around the red-haired man. The soul devourer had finished digesting the red lights, and as Wang Lin retreated, it came forward again. So just like this, the cycle continued. Although the blood sea replenished the red lights around the red-haired man, there were a lot less lights than before. It seemed that it took time for the blood sea to replenish the red lights. The red-haired man revealed a euphoric expression. When he forced the red lights out of his body, he had to suffer unimaginable pain, but after seeing the red lights decrease before him, he thought that even if the pain was 10 times worse, he would still be willing to suffer through it. Time slowly passed. All the demonic cultivators silently watched the scene before them. They all held their breath. Even Donghwa's group was nervous. Wang Lin's ability to break the seal played a vital role in their future plans. But if the seal couldn't be broken, then no matter how carefully crafted the plan was, it would all be for nothing. As time passed, the red lights around the red-haired man started to circle around him faster and faster, but the quantity was steadily decreasing. He let out several loud roars. Constantly forcing the red lights out was taking a toll on his body. His face looked ferocious and his veins bulged green, as if there were green worms crawling in his veins. Among the many demonic cultivators, Sky Devil Magician looked at the scene with a sense of unwillingness in his heart. He exerted all that effort for his plan, but at the last moment it was destroyed. It made his heart bleed. Now that he saw that the red-haired man was breaking the seal, he felt despair. When the red-haired man breaks the seal, opens up the dead soul seal, and obtains the inheritance of knowledge, he will notice that if it was missing. With the red-haired man's power, he would be able to use a technique to find that it was Sky Devil Magician who had it. By then, the only road left for him would be death. He dared to be bold before because the red-haired man was trapped in the blood sea and was unable to detect what was happening outside. Only in the blood sea was the red-haired man not restricted. Sky Devil Magician let out a bitter laugh in his heart. He looked up at Wang Lin and sighed in his heart. He knew that Wang Lin came in with his disciple. He never thought that, because of his own schemes, the red-haired man would be able to break his seal. If he didn't let 6 Desire Devil Lord and them leave 1,000 years ago, then although he wouldn't be able to get the inheritance treasure, his life would still be safe. All of this could be described as karma. Sky Devil Magician let out another sigh, but as he looked at Donghwa's group, his hatred disappeared and he began to ponder. Sky Devil Magician's expression was calm, not revealing any of his inner thoughts. He was a very sly old man. Even facing such a great ordeal, his expression didn't change at all. The red-haired man simply used the soul fragments to leave a mark on these people to control them. The reason Sky Devil Magician was able to retain his sanity was mainly due to his cultivation technique. Beside the mysterious Sky Devil cultivation method, he also had a mysterious chant. He accidentally found that chant during his first trip here. He didn't pass down the chant to anyone, not even 6 Desire Devil Lord knew of its existence. It was because of this chant and his countless years of cultivation that, when he was caught by the red-haired man and forced to fuse with the soul fragment, he was able to take the initiative and suppress the soul fragment instead of fusing with it. He looked at Donghwa's group. Several years ago, he begun to have his suspicion that, among the thousands of cultivators here, it couldn't be only him that had suppressed his soul fragment. He suspected that there were others who had as well. Those people were most likely the 10 Blood Sea Generals. Sky Devil Magician's heart shook. If those men were like him, when the seal breaks, they will act. If this was true, then he might still have a chance. While thinking about it, Sky Devil Magician's heart grew excited. He took a deep breath to calm himself down and looked up. Each time Wang Lin devoured a red light, His soul gem became larger. As his soul gem grew larger, his mind felt a sense of clarity. Wang Lin's teamwork with the Soul Devourer also became better and better. The color of the swirl of soul fragments around the red-haired man grew dim, and the amount of soul fragments was decreasing. But in that moment, the surrounding sea of blood suddenly rose up. All the blood on the ground started to float up, forming tens of thousands of soul fragments. They headed toward the red-haired man. This sudden change of events caught everyone off guard. Without a word, Wang Lin's soul backed off, afraid of getting affected. The red-haired man let out a growl. His hand quickly formed a seal and a circle appeared before him. He pressed on the circle and countless rays of five-colored light came out of his body and formed a five-colored barrier around him. Outside the barrier, the soul fragments charged and pushed against it. The red-haired man looked up. His arrogance and haughtiness were at their limit. He muttered, "To see, this seal can't trap me." With that, he casually grabbed with this right hand. A demonic cultivator that was sitting nearby flew into the air. His face revealed an alarmed expression. Before he could say anything, his body flew to the five-colored barrier and more than 10 soul fragments went into his body. He screamed again and again. His hands were constantly tearing at his body. In the blink of an eye, his entire body was covered in wounds and blood. Normally speaking, these demonic cultivators couldn't even handle one soul fragment. But now more 10 suddenly entered this one's body. His only fate was death. The red-haired man normally didn't attempt this extreme method because it didn't help him at all. The moment the cultivator dies, the soul fragments would return to him. That didn't help him break the seal at all. But now it was different. He had almost broken the seal. If he didn't use this method to delay the soul fragments, then when the barrier breaks, the soul fragments would all enter his body and render all of the work from earlier pointless. The red-haired man ignored the cultivator. His right hand drew in the air. A golden symbol appeared and landed on the cultivator. The moment it landed, a golden light surrounded the cultivator's body. Soon after, the red-haired man's eyes released a red light. With waves of both of his hands, several cultivators' bodies flew into the air. After they absorbed some red lights, they were covered by the golden light as well. Their bodies were very bloody. Wang Lin's was alarmed. A moment later, another cultivator was grabbed by the red-haired man. A look of horror appeared on his face, but was quickly replaced by a decisive one. He rapidly performed a technique with his hand and disappeared on the spot, then reappeared 10 feet away. The moment he reappeared, he created a rift in the air and charged toward it. The red-haired revealed a cold gaze. He didn't stop the cultivator but sneered. He pointed his finger at his brow and spit out, "Explode!" With a bang, the cultivator's body exploded as he was heading into the rift. His blood and flesh scattered everywhere. A soul fragment appeared and charged toward the red-haired man. It joined the other soul fragments outside of the barrier. A thought flashed through the red-haired man's mind. He suddenly opened both his hands and, with a growl, he grabbed at the air and hundreds of cultivators suddenly flew up into the air. Their faces were filled with fear and helplessness, but there were some with the exact opposite expression, looks of relief. They flew toward the barrier and many soul fragments entered their bodies. They became just like the people before them. After using hundreds of people as buffers, the amount soul fragments outside the barrier had decreased a bit. However, the five-colored barrier wasn't as strong as it was before and started to tremble, as if it could break at any time. The red-haired man didn't say a word, but grabbed again with his hands. This time he grabbed more than 300 people. Among those people, 8 of them suddenly used various techniques to break free. They desperately tried to escape by opening up rifts. Meanwhile, 4 people on the ground also jumped up, opened rifts and disappeared into them. The red-haired man's cold smile grew wider. He didn't kill these cultivators like he did the ones before, but retracted his gaze after looking for some time. While killing them would be easy, the soul fragments returning to him would make a big impact on his barrier. There was no rush to kill those people. Wang Lin watched what had happened. He knew that the red-haired man wouldn't act against him, because he still needed him to absorb the remaining soul fragments. Among the people that escaped, Donghwa's group wasn't in their ranks. All 10 of them sat there waiting without any expression. Outside of the barrier were more than 400 golden circles. Within each golden circle was a bloody cultivator, each with more than 10 soul fragments within their bodies. The red-haired man gave the remaining hundreds of cultivators a cold look. Suddenly, 3 to 5 cultivators opened up rifts and entered them. The red-haired man sneered. He didn't bother with them, but looked at the soul devourer and growled, "Devour!" The cloud-like soul devourer extended its illusionary body to form a mouth and shot toward the soul fragments outside the barrier. After devouring more than 10 soul fragments, it was about to retreat. The red-haired man frowned. He knew that if this kept up, the blood sea would activate and try to seal him again. His face revealed a malicious expression. He reached out and grabbed the soul devourer that was about to retreat and said, "Continue." The soul devourer hesitated, then opened his mouth and devoured more than 10 soul fragments again. The red-haired man was still not satisfied. He bit his finger and drew 2 strange symbols. One of the symbols released a 5-colored light and landed on the soul devourer. Wang Lin noticed that the soul devourer suddenly became violent. Countless threads of divine sense spread out from it. "You broke our promise." The red-haired man opened his mouth and sucked the other symbol into it. After, he gloomily said, "Since when do I not keep my promises? I only have some control right now. As long as you help me break this seal, I'll use the ancient god's power to make you a human body, and also get you out of the decaying world. Now continue to devour." As soon as he said those words, the symbol he swallowed appeared on his head and flashed a few times. At the same time, on the soul devourer's body, the same symbol appeared and seemed to flash in sync with the one on the red-haired man's head. Then the soul devourer immediately started to devour the soul fragments like crazy, as if he had no control. After consuming the soul fragments one by one, his body glowed red. He looked like a red cloud. Wang Lin could clearly feel the soul devourer sending out waves of painful divine sense. It seemed he had devoured too much and exceeded his limits. If this continued, then the soul devourer could become like those cultivators. The red-haired man's eyes became cold and he gazed at Wang Lin. Wang Lin's expression remained normal. He sent out his G-realm soul. It flew out of the barrier and started to devour the soul fragments outside. This time Wang Lin devoured very quickly. After devouring more than 10, he felt full, but he didn't stop and kept devouring. He secretly started to operate the ancient god tactic, so the soul fragments quickly fused with his soul. The 5-colored barrier surrounding the red-haired man began to shake more and more. It was bound to break at any moment. There were still some soul fragments left, but even with Wang Lin and the soul devourer, they still wouldn't be able to devour them all in time. At the same time, all the stone pillars in the blood sea, besides the one the red-haired man was sitting on, exploded simultaneously and turned into red powder. It seemed the red powder was condensing into soul fragments. The moment the stone pillars exploded, the cultivators on top of each of them jumped off. The red-haired man's face darkened. He gritted his teeth and immediately grabbed 300 of the 600 or so remaining cultivators and dragged them toward the barrier. At that moment, the 5-colored barrier broke, but the moment the barrier broke, the red-haired man used his power to force the soul fragments into the body of the 300 cultivators. The moment the 5-colored barrier broke, the rubble of the stone pillar started to glow bright red. There were no more soul fragments around the red-haired man. The seal on his soul was gone. It could be said that the him now had temporarily broken the seal. His eyes emitted a demonic gaze. He quickly raised his hand and swiped it downwards. Suddenly, a giant rift appeared above him. The rift was very large, and layers of gray fog spilled out of it. Wang Lin was very familiar with the gray fog. He immediately recognized it as the fog that was outside the Dead Soul Sea. Meanwhile, within the red dust, countless red lights appeared. The specks of dust assembled into soul fragments and charged toward the red-haired man. If those soul fragments were to land, then everything that had happened would have been a waste. The red-haired man's eyes became cold. He would not allow those soul fragments to seal him again. After tearing open the rift, he stretched out his right hand and lowly growled, "Tu Si is long dead. Using my name Ta San, I call upon my life-saving weapon, the Star Destroyer Spear." The moment he finished uttering those words, a long spear that looked like a black dragon suddenly burst out from the gray fog and appeared before him. The spear paused for a moment, but quickly landed in the red-haired man's hand. The moment the red-haired man gripped the spear, a thunderous roar echoed through the surrounding area. Shortly after, the pillar that he was standing on collapsed and became a small pile of rubble. The red-haired man still floated in the air. His eyes were filled with pride. As for the soul fragments, it seemed he didn't care about them at all. He waved the spear and all the soul fragments paused in midair. They floated 10 feet away from him. Meanwhile, the red-haired man moved his body and charged toward the rift. At the same time, everyone in Donghua's group, especially the old man who made the deal with Wang Lin, revealed nervous expressions. Without a word, they quickly stood up and followed XIAN into the rift. As they passed Wang Lin, the old man looked at Wang Lin and slightly nodded. Wang Lin's soul went back into his body and moved into the rift. The remaining surviving demonic cultivators all followed them into the rift without hesitation. After entering the rift, Wang Lin immediately realized that they were just outside the Soul Sea. Right below them was the Dead Soul Sea that Wang Lin had tried to break into before. The Soul Sea was split into two. One half was the Blood Sea and the other was the Dead Soul Sea. A thought flashed through Wang Lin's mind. From the moment he entered the rift, he had been very careful. He discreetly looked around and saw that Donghua's group had positioned themselves in such a way that they surrounded him and the red-haired man. This position was very intricate. If one didn't look carefully, then they couldn't see any sign of it. But Wang Lin had been through much and was able to see it at a glance. Wang Lin's expression remained normal. He sneered in his heart. He was very suspicious of Donghua's group. Throughout all those years, had they really never shown any signs or allowed XIAN to realize that they had always been plotting against him? It was a bit suspicious that people who had been secretly plotting for who knows how many years to be this blatant in front of XIAN. But even if XIAN were to realize it, it didn't have anything to do with Wang Lin at all. He just wanted to be present during the moment the Dead Soul Sea was open so he could enter it and use his part of inheritance of knowledge to leave this suffocating place. The red-haired man stood above the Dead Soul Sea and started laughing madly. He shouted, "To see you couldn't keep me trapped. Even though I was only a sliver of your evil consciousness, this inheritance should have been mine." As he was speaking, his face turned grim and the spear in his hand struck down. Suddenly, the wall of fog that surrounded the Dead Soul Sea caved in and a tunnel going deep in the direction of the Dead Soul Sea appeared soon after. The fog in the surrounding area was quickly pushed out of the way. The tunnel was deep, the bottom could not be seen. A muffled roar could be heard, as if there were something roaring inside the tunnel. "To see, even your life-saving weapon, the Star Destroyer Spear, has submitted to me. Only I have the qualifications to succeed your inheritance," XIAN said, as the spear in his hand struck out again. This time it was a vertical slash. It created a cross with the previous slash, forming a giant cross. In the center of the cross was a hole dozens of feet wide. XIAN entered it. After the red-haired man went in, Donghua's group became more nervous, but they quickly followed behind. As for Wang Lin, his eyes lit up and followed them in as well. Meanwhile, all the surviving demonic cultivators revealed excited expressions and shouted with joy. The red-haired man was in the front. He turned around and looked behind him. His lips curled into a cold smile. Soon he arrived at the bottom of the gray fog. The path was blocked by a layer of clouds. Purple lightning flashed constantly in the clouds. The red-haired man didn't say a word. He tossed the spear forward. It transformed into a black dragon. It charged into the clouds right as a bolt of purple lightning landed on it. The red-haired man didn't pause for a moment. He quickly followed the spear into the clouds. Suddenly, countless bolts of purple lightning shot out of the clouds and landed on his body. Under the bombardment of the purple lightning, a lightning sphere formed around XIAN's body, but he was not harmed. He started to laugh. Wang Lin's pupils contracted as he stared at the red-haired man. He remembered that the purple lightning that appeared at the Second Realm's Restriction Mountain was the same purple lightning as this. Wang Lin blinked and slowed down. From somewhere behind him, he heard the old man's voice asking, "Little friend, how come you're not moving forward?" Wang Lin didn't turn his head. From the moment they left the Blood Sea, the 10 old cultivators had been keeping their eyes on him, preventing him from backing out. He had only slowed down a bit, but the old man was already questioning him. From this, Wang Lin could tell how important this was to them. Wang Lin didn't know why they had so much confidence that they could even ignore Ta Xin's existence. But he had already made up his mind. Leaving this place was his main goal. Within the lightning ball, the red-haired man formed a strange hand sign and said, "2C is long dead. I use my name Ta Xian to call upon my family's lightning weapon, the purple moon." The moment those words left his lips, the technique in his hand shot out and entered the clouds. Soon after, the clouds began to shrink. The raging purple lightning slowly died down. Eventually, the cloud turned into a half-moon blade and fell into the red-haired man's hand. After he looked at it, he opened his mouth. The half-moon blade shrank and entered his mouth. Under the gray fog were the clouds of purple lightning, and under the clouds of purple lightning was a completely black sea. This was the dead soul formed by half of ancient god 2C's soul when he died. The red-haired man looked at the half-moon blade. His face revealed an excited expression. Then he charged toward the Dead Sea under his feet. The moment he rushed forward, a roar came from the Dead Sea. Soon after, a non-dragon, but dragon-like creature suddenly bursted out from the Dead Sea. As it moved, it created countless waves in the Dead Sea. Shortly after, the creature's large head came out from the sea and stared at the red-haired man. Ta Xun looked at the creature and frowned. He shouted, "Evil creature, you can't even recognize me?" The creature that was millions of feet long slowly moved, causing the waves in the sea to roll violently. It stared at Ta Xian and suddenly spoke human words. "Ta Xian, you are an evil consciousness that formed when the master was practicing the flowing ink transformation divine technique. How could I forget about you? If it wasn't for you revolting when the master was at the most critical point of his cultivation, the master wouldn't have died." Ta Xun coldly snorted and grimly said, "What does this have to do with me?" 2C's ambition was too big, trying to master a divine technique that no one could master. If it wasn't for that, how could he have created me? The moment he separated me from his soul, he abandoned me, but I have to thank him, otherwise the moment he died would have been the moment I perished as well. The large creature's eyes became cold and said, "Before Master's death, he told me to guard the inheritance of knowledge. Without my permission, no one can get the inheritance. The inheritance of power is already mine, and the only thing left is the inheritance of knowledge. 2C's memories are useless to me. Everything he knew I know as well. If it wasn't for the restrictions placed by the law of inheritance that requires both inheritances to fully control the power in this body, I wouldn't even have bothered with all this, and I wouldn't have gotten trapped by him in the blood sea for so many years," the red-haired man said as he struck forward with the spear. Suddenly, a dark cyclone appeared. The cyclone grew larger and larger, until the wind was roaring. It charged at the creature. Seeing the scene before him, Wang Lin couldn't help but form a doubt in his heart. If what this creature said was true, and he was guarding the inheritance of knowledge, then when Sky Devil Magician opened the portal to the inheritance treasure before, why was there no danger? And even after part of it was taken, why was there no sign of this creature? Wang Lin looked down at the Dead Sea and his doubts increased. He frowned. He quietly activated the ancient god tactic in his mind. According to the inherited memory, anyone with the inheritance only had to activate their inheritance in the Dead Soul Sea to leave. The large creature coldly stared at the red-haired man. It didn't even care about the cyclone roaring towards it. The moment before it landed, the creature whipped its head out and hit the cyclone. The cyclone collided with the snake and collapsed. Wang Lin's soul activated his portion of the inheritance, but his heart quickly sank. It seemed that his part of the inheritance wasn't enough to cause any reaction, despite his heart wanting to leave this place. Wang Lin's expression became gloomy. He had doubts before, and with the inheritance not working here, he confirmed that this place wasn't the sea of knowledge. As a result, everything he had done before had been a waste. Wang Lin's eyes became cold, but his expression quickly recovered. He was well aware that none of the recent events had been normal. According to the memory from his part of the inheritance, the fact that 2C's soul became the Dead Sea and Blood Sea when it was split into two parts was true. This place really was the Dead Soul Sea, but why wouldn't the inheritance of knowledge work here? Wang Lin looked around. His gaze fell upon a scale on the million-foot-long creature and a thought came to his mind. His heart skipped a beat as he stared at the scale and memorized its location. When Wang Lin activated his inheritance of knowledge, he felt a faint response from that scale. Although the response was weak, it responded to the call of his part of the inheritance, so that scale must have been special in some way. Wang Lin's eyes lit up. His didn't raise his right arm, but gently waved his index finger. A very small rift appeared and quickly disappeared. Wang Lin's movement was very secretive, and the small rift disappeared as soon as it appeared, so no one else noticed. Wang Lin's heart calmed down. The appearance of that rift meant that he could use his unique method of moving around with his portion of the inheritance. He scanned his own bag of holding with his divine sense and sneered in his heart. He had a lot of bags of holding. The one that made him the most worried was the one holding the 10 life-saving treasures, the Huan Yuan beast trap, and the 20 top-quality spirit stones. He had never let his guard down since he received them. He didn't believe that these 10 people would so easily allow him to hold on to these things. What he had said before was to simply mislead them. After a lot of experience with entering the rifts, Wang Lin realized that the rifts that were opened by using the inheritance were different. If one entered it, they wouldn't have to immediately exit on the other side, because there was a small space between entrance and the exit. The space was filled with chaotic energy that prevented any divine sense to enter. He experimented with it before. He took out a flying sword and threw it into the rift. When the sword entered the rift, he lost connection with it. Only after the sword came out from the other side was the connection restored. His heart became excited. If he could take advantage of this property of the rift, it could work wonders for him. After pondering a little, Wang Lin took the bag of top-quality spirit stones, the beast trap, and the 10 instruments, mixed them up a bit, and placed them in 3 different bags of holding. At the same time, a change occurred. Domu's group looked at each other and, following the old man, put their hands together. A light beam connected the 10 of them, forming an irregular shape that surrounded XIAN. XIAN's cold eyes glanced at the 10 people. His face revealed a cold smile. He sneered. "You 10 have waited so many years and now finally found an opportunity? Very good." The old man's face became gloomy. Without a word, his 2 hands constantly changed. The other 9 followed suit. Their hands changed signs faster and faster. The irregular shape that had been formed suddenly started to glow and close in on XIAN. XIAN smiled coldly as he looked away. He looked at the creature and slowly said, "It seems you guys have already been in contact with each other. You plan to seal me again." The creature stared at XIAN and calmly said, "After sealing you, these 10 will each get part of the inheritance." With this large of a temptation, anyone would agree. XIAN didn't seem to care about the irregular shape quickly closing in on his body. He started to laugh loudly. His right hand held the spear and suddenly struck forward. A series of booms could be heard. A large black dragon suddenly appeared and charged at the irregular shape. Shortly after, the red-haired man pointed his finger at his brow while coldly looking directly at the old man and shouted, "Explode!" The old man's expression changed. His body started to glow red. Slivers of chaotic chi came out of him as his body trembled. He quickly placed his hand on his stomach and shouted, "Scatter!" Suddenly, the red light was vented out of his body. The other 9's faces became more serious and their hands changed signs. This caused them to switch to a state in which they could absorb chi. The red light quickly split into 9 red lights and entered the bodies of the 9 people. They were glowing red. The old man quickly shouted, "Close!" In that moment, the red light quickly left the 9 people's bodies, became one again, and went back to the old man's body. The moment the red light entered his body, he trembled and spat out a mouthful of black blood. His face suddenly paled. He stared at XIAN and grinned. "XIAN, since this old man dared to attempt to kill you, I already have a method to break your technique. This technique is useless against me." All these events felt like they took a long time, but they happened within the span of a few breaths. XIAN secretly sneered. He pointed his finger at his brow and looked at the 9 other people, one by one, and shouted, "Explode!" The old man's eyes lit up and he quickly shouted, "Li Peng!" XIAN paused. He faintly remembered the words Li Peng. It was the name of the person from the group of 11 that had escaped from him all those years ago. At this point, a laugh appeared from the mouth of the creature. That voice clearly wasn't from the creature, but from another person. The creature opened its mouth and spat out a core. A tumor grew on the core. The tumor was tightly attached to the core, as if it were a parasite. After the tumor grew a bit, it split open and a person's face appeared from within. The face looked very scholar-like, but the eyes that were filled with evil like a demon lord's eyes, coldly stared at Ta-san and spit out a complicated chant. The chant created 10 circles that quickly appeared around the 10 people, and completely negated Ta-san's method of exploding the soul fragments. Ta-san jerked his head around and coldly stared at the face. His expression became dark and he said, "It seems the reason I couldn't catch you all those years ago was because you were saved by this animal." The head smiled bitterly, revealing a look of resentment. His voice was filled with hate and said word for word, "Back when the 11 of us believed your lies, broke the seal that 2C had placed on you, and allowed you to regain your freedom, we realized that that was the biggest mistake of our lives. Today we will clear up our mistake. It doesn't matter if it's the inheritance of power or inheritance of knowledge, both will be ours." Ta-san moved the spear in his hand. He revealed a sarcastic smile and calmly said, "First, it's 10 people betraying me, then this animal was hiding another person. Can't just be these 2 moves. What else is there?" With that, he gazed at Wang Lin and the hundreds of dumbfounded demonic cultivators that were outside the battlefield. The head that was connected to the core sneered, "You will find out." With that, he communicated with the creature using some unknown method. The creature suddenly moved violently and coiled in the water. Its enormous body kept coiling, until it reached the height of Ta-san and completely surrounded him. Within the creature's body, the black dragon formed by the spear stopped a dozen feet from the irregular shape. As a result, Ta-san was completely surrounded. Ta-san's expression remained calm. He let out a sarcastic smile and spit out a purple light that became the half-moon blade. It landed in his left hand. Ta-san held the spear in his right hand and the half-moon blade in his left hand. He attacked with both. Suddenly, the irregular shape that surrounded him showed signs of collapse. Ta-san's eyes lit up. He threw the 2 weapons forward and they each formed a meteor that hit the edge of the irregular shape. Among the 10 people, 4 of them spit out a mouthful of blood and trembled as if they couldn't hold on much longer. In that moment of crisis, the creature's body suddenly turned stiff and a bump formed on the top of its head. Within the bump, a man covered in scales appeared. His pupils were diamond-shaped. They gave off an inhuman feel. The moment the person appeared, a shriek came from his mouth. The shriek was extremely sharp. It formed countless invisible blades that homed in on Ta-san. At the same time, the old man's expression turned rigid. His forehead was covered in sweat. The irregular shape formed by the 10 of them solely depended on themselves to maintain. With every shake caused by Ta-san, their hearts trembled. He looked at Wang Lin and lowly growled, "Little friend, act now." Wang Lin's expression became gloomy. He stared at Ta-senator since the moment the old man started to act. Wang Lin had observed Ta-san, and from the start until now, the old man's eyes were still calm. After hearing the old man's words, Wang Lin suddenly moved and charged toward the old man. The old man's expression became excited. Right when he was about to speak, Wang Lin's direction shifted and he flew past the old man and quickly charged toward the million-foot-long creature. Wang Lin didn't care if these people lived or died. All he cared about at that moment was one thing, and that was the special scale on the creature. In fact, from the start, he never planned to help with the so-called seal. Wang Lin didn't believe he had the power to do so. The old man's expression became sullen. He snorted and placed his hands on his chest, forming a diamond shape. He shouted, "My instrument, attack!" The moment the old man's words came out, Wang Lin's right hand quickly opened a rift and entered it. The man standing on top of the creature jerked his head and looked toward Wang Lin with a strange expression on his face. He thought, "Impossible." The moment Wang Lin entered the rift, the bag holding the top-quality spirit stones, the 10 instruments, and the beast trap all started to glow. However, the glow immediately dimmed once he entered the rift, as if a force was interfering with the divine sense connected to the bags. Wang Lin already knew that with the personalities of those 10 people, they wouldn't just hand over their treasures. They must have placed some sort of technique on them to allow them to control their treasures remotely. So when Wang Lin received those items, He had always been on guard against them. He decided to use the rift that could cut off divine sense as a countermeasure. The moment Wang Lin's body entered the rift, the old man's expression changed as he noticed that his divine sense was obstructed. Ta Xin's sarcastic smile became wider. He let out a growl and waved his right hand, causing a circle of red light to appear. It was small at first but quickly began to widen. Soon after, his right hand didn't stop moving and formed more red circles. He sent them in all directions. The irregular shape surrounding Ta Xin started to shake violently. The old man didn't have time to worry about Wang Lin, and regained his focus to keep the irregular shape intact. As for the man covered in scales, who had been standing on top of the creature, he began to ponder. Without a word, he slammed his hand on his forehead and he split into two. Facepalm so powerful, his body split into two. One of his bodies charged toward the irregular shape. The moment he touched the irregular shape, he recited a chant and used his hand to form seals that allowed him to pass through the irregular shape. After successfully entering, his eyes lit up and he waved his right hand, causing an illusionary spear to appear in his grasp. The spear looked exactly like the one Ta Xin had, only this one was a mere illusion. But the pressure released from the spear wasn't in any way inferior to the real spear. He immediately lunged forward and attacked Ta Xin. Outside the irregular shape, the other him drifted in the air, constantly chanting and forming hand signs. Countless balls of purple lightning appeared around his body. More and more balls of lightning appeared. The lightning crackled between the balls, releasing a destructive aura. Although he was constantly performing techniques, his eyes were locked on to the special scale on the creature's body while carefully observing the surroundings. All of this happened in almost the exact instant Wang Lin's body disappeared into the rift. The moment the old man shifted his attention to maintaining the irregular shape, a rift suddenly appeared near the special scale on the creature. A shadow suddenly came out of the rift. The old man and the man covered in scales immediately noticed the rift and the shadow coming out of it. The old man's face revealed an hateful expression. He tried to do two things at once. He used his left side to keep the irregular shape intact and raised a finger in his right hand to point at the figure that appeared from the rift. However, he was momentarily stunned, then revealed a cold smile. From the figure that appeared, he couldn't sense his life-saving treasure at all. As for the man covered in scales, he didn't even look at the figure, but waved his hand, commanding a small part of the balls of purple lightning to charge toward the figure. However, after a few moments, he frowned and commanded the balls of lightning to change direction, but the figure, instead of dodging them, charged toward the balls of lightning. The figure moved extremely fast and collided with the balls of lightning, but the figure quickly bursted into small creatures. They were completely destroyed by the balls of lightning. While the lightning was rumbling, four large black tornadoes appeared from the rift. The tornadoes hummed, and one of them seemed to be concealing something inside. The scale-covered man's expression became strange. After carefully looking at the tornadoes, he let out a sarcastic smile. Within those tornadoes were only some soul fragments, not Wang Lin. All of this was simply to trick people. He waved his right hand and more of the balls of purple lightning were sent out. This time the balls of lightning went around the tornadoes because he had a new target, the rift. As for the old man, he had the same idea. His pointed at the rift with this right hand. As a result, the four tornadoes successfully made their way past the scaled man and charged toward the million-foot-long creature. Soon the tornadoes arrived next to the creature. When the balls of lightning hit the rift slowly became smaller and smaller, until it disappeared. The man covered in scales was stunned. Without a word, he waved both of his hands and all the balls of purple lightning around him suddenly shot toward the four tornadoes. He wished he could send the body that he had sent to fight with Ta Xin to charge at the tornadoes as well. But in that moment Ta Xin, who was surrounded at the center of the irregular shape, stared at the black tornadoes. His eyes lit up as he understood what was happening and let out a laugh. Disregarding the person he was fighting, he chanted a few very complex chants and his body suddenly turned into a blood mist. After the blood mist appeared, it quickly spread in all directions. The irregular shape that surrounded him suddenly collapsed and released a shockwave outwards. This caused all 10 people that were maintaining the irregular shape to display frightened expressions. 6 people, including Donghua, were hit by the shock wave. Their bodies were soon invaded by the blood mist, which rampaged through their bodies, destroying all their internal organs, before finally exiting from their heads. The moment the blood mist came out, the 6 revealed looks of disbelief as their limp and empty bodies fell straight into the Dead Sea. The man charging toward Wang Lin had to stop and turn around. He didn't have the time to deal with Wang Lin. Both his hands opened, directing the balls of purple lightning that were charging at the black tornadoes to turn and shoot toward the blood mist. Meanwhile, his other body threw the illusionary spear. The spear turned into a black dragon and charged toward the blood mist. As for the 4 people that survived, all were extremely afraid, especially the old man. He never thought that XIAN still had a move like this. The blood mist under the pursuit of the balls of purple lightning, and the black dragon quickly came together to form 10 identical copies of the red-haired man. They all appeared in different locations. One of them suddenly charged toward the black tornadoes. The remaining 9 bodies followed the lead of the 2 that held the spear and the half-moon blade. They started to close in on the man covered in scales and the remaining 4 survivors. Almost immediately, the body that chased the black tornadoes caught up. He waved his hand and sent out a red light. The 4 tornadoes quickly fused into one. After the tornadoes fused into one, it collapsed and countless souls of small creatures burst out in all directions. A few of the souls hit the scales of the million-foot-long creature. The sudden turn of events stunned that clone. He let out a smile and pointed his finger in various directions. With each point, a large amount of the small creature's souls disappeared. But at the same time, the souls that hit the million-foot-long creature started to gather together. They released a demonic feel before quickly exploding. This explosion caused a chain effect. All of the remaining souls exploded, causing a large amount of spiritual energy to release into the surrounding area. The moment the explosions occurred, a rift appeared near the million-foot-long creature's body and a figure quickly rushed out. It moved like lightning, and in a flash it landed on a scale on the giant creature's body. This person was Wang Lin. However, this time his body didn't look real, more like an illusion. It was clear that the him now was his soul that had left his body. The moment Wang Lin appeared, the clone of the man covered in scales that was fighting with XIAN and slowly moving here was suddenly stunned as he stared at Wang Lin. His eyes revealed a look of disbelief. From Wang Lin's soul, he sensed a fragment of the inheritance of knowledge. All of this happened in a very short period of time. Wang Lin had always had a careful personality when he entered the rift, and felt the destructive force coming from the items he got from Donghua's group. This caused him to be extra careful. In conclusion, how could he reappear without any preparation? Thus, he used the method from the inheritance of knowledge to hide in the rift, and used the rift's effect of blocking out divine sense to block the effects of those treasures. After he carefully examined the treasures, he noticed that the glow dimmed and the destructive force went away. Only then did he relax a bit. So after he opened the rift, he sent out the souls of small beasts as scouts. He found that the attention of not only the old man, but also the attention of the man covered in scales were focused on him. Wang Lin was watching when that man come out from the million-foot-long creature earlier, and he realized that the man covered in scales could fight evenly with Senator. Taking these factors into account, Wang Lin didn't dare come out. He carefully pondered for a while, then he sent out 4 black tornadoes and hid part of his divine sense inside of them, then quickly retreated back into the rift. As for everything that happened between XIAN and them, he saw it all through the black tornadoes, especially XIAN's supernatural ability, which made Wang Lin feel that his earlier decision was correct. If he had really followed the old man's instructions and tried to seal XIAN, it seemed that before he could even complete the seal, he would have died like those 6. After XIAN formed the 10 clones, one of them came toward Wang Lin. Wang Lin fused the 4 tornadoes himself, before XIAN could act, and the countless souls of small beasts burst out. As a result, his divine sense scattered among the souls of the small beasts, so the chances of him being found out were a lot lower. However, Wang Lin was not arrogant enough to think that he wouldn't be found out. If he was found out, then, at most, he would just cut off that part of his divine sense. After all, the main purpose of this portion of his divine sense was to act as a scout. He controlled the souls of the small beasts to land on the body of the million-foot creature. One of the souls hit that special scale by accident, and the moment it touched the scale, he clearly felt a strong call from it. Under this call, the portion of inheritance that he held inside his mind felt like it was going to jump out of his body. But at the same time, within his inheritance, a new piece of memory appeared. After understanding the memory, Wang Lin's heart couldn't help but sink. Wang Lin soon decided to make all of the souls of the small beasts explode. He sneered as his soul left his body and exited the rift like lightning. Just as Wang Lin expected, the cultivation gap between him and Ta San was far too big. Despite it being a clone, it was clearly not at a level that Wang Lin could hide from. The clone left a feeling of disdain in his heart. He already detected Wang Lin's divine sense in the black tornadoes, or else he wouldn't have used a power that would hurt his body. In fact, when Ta San entered the Dead Soul Sea, he felt that something was wrong. Even though he had no connection with the inheritance of knowledge, because he was born from 2C's evil thoughts, he was very familiar with 2C's knowledge sea. This place seemed a bit odd to him, but he couldn't clearly say what was odd about it. This was entirely based off his instincts. Even with the million-foot-long creature appearing and the 10 people betraying him, he didn't mind much. All he really cared about was what was odd about this place. It wasn't until Wang Lin appeared from the rift that it struck him like lightning and made him come to some understanding. This was why he used the supernatural power to break out, and why he didn't immediately destroy Wang Lin's divine sense, because he wanted to see exactly what this soul devourer had figured out. In a flash, Wang Lin's soul landed on the million-foot-long creature's body. His body was very hazy, and he directed a cold smile at Ta Sen's clone. Ta Sen's clone stared at the scales around where Wang Lin stood. He let out a cold smile. He knew that the odd thing about this place was one of those scales. While he didn't know which scale it was, once he fused back into one body, he knew he would be able to figure it out. At this point in his eyes, Wang Lin had lost all value. He formed a diamond with his hand and looked at Wang Lin and said, "Die." Wang Lin's smile became even colder. Earlier, when his divine sense hit the scale, the memory he gained was that no physical body could enter the place holding the inheritance of knowledge. Only the soul could enter. After receiving this memory, he decided to head out with just his soul. This was his bold idea. If everything turned out as he expected, then he would be the first person to enter the place holding the inheritance of knowledge. If this was true, then obtaining the complete inheritance of knowledge was not impossible. Thinking about this, Wang Lin's heart began to pound. As for Ta Sen's clone's attack, Wang Lin didn't mind it at all. His soul started to spread out like a cloud, and 3 words began to shine. Those 3 words were, Ancient God Tactic. Ta Sen's clone's face suddenly changed. All the other clones that were fighting noticed something and all turned to Wang Lin's direction. All of their expressions suddenly changed greatly. The clones stared at the 3 golden words. Soon his body moved, and all of the 9 other clones charged toward where Wang Lin stood. Almost immediately, the man covered in scales was shocked. Then an idea came to him and he quickly fused back into one body. He chased after Ta Sen's clones and laughed loudly. "Ta San, anyone but you can inherit the master's inheritance of knowledge. Little guy, it all depends on your luck." Those last words were meant for Wang Lin. In that moment he made a decision that would cost him a price he could barely withstand. Suddenly, the man covered in scales pointed his hand at his brow and said, "Using my clone as a sacrifice, I transfer the inheritance of knowledge." His clone quickly shook, and along with the spear, both turned into golden specks of light and disappeared. As the clone that was the closest to Wang Lin charged at him, Wang Lin's soul, which was spreading out quickly, shrunk, as if it were being sucked in by a strong force. In the blink of an eye, Wang Lin's soul was sucked in by the special scale and disappeared. Soon after the man covered in scales said those words, the scale exploded and disappeared without a trace. Ta Sen's clone turned back toward the man covered in scales and roared. His clones fused back into one body. His left hand was holding the half-moon blade and his right hand was holding the spear. He stared at the man covered in scales with intense rage in his eyes. If that little guy doesn't manage to merge with the inheritance of knowledge within 1,000 years, you might have another chance. The man covered in scales began to laugh loudly. Disregarding what happened with those 2, after Wang Lin's soul was absorbed by the scale, he arrived at a world of clouds. This place had no sky or land, but endless clouds as far as the eyes could see. There were many blue ice crystals flowing in the clouds, each of them about 10 feet wide. Wang Lin scanned the area and found a total of 94 ice crystals. After scanning the area, he discovered that one of the ice crystals was smaller than the rest. Wang Lin immediately recognized it as the ice crystal that Sky Devil Magician tried to get when he opened that tunnel. Wang Lin's eyes lit up. He finally understood that the ancient god's inheritance of knowledge wasn't just one ice crystal, but 94 of them. The part that Wang Lin had absorbed wasn't even 1% of it. Wang Lin was here as his soul. After pondering a little, his soul landed on top of that ice crystal. The moment his soul touched it, the ice crystal suddenly melted and fused with Wang Lin's soul. Waves of majestic memories entered Wang Lin's soul. As time passed, the memories came to him faster and faster. Wang Lin's soul became like an expanding cloud. Countless complex chants, countless strange technique, and countless fragments of memories stormed into Wang Lin's mind like roaring dragons. His soul was torn apart, then reassembled. As that cycle continued, tidal waves of pain completely engulfed Wang Lin. In reality, Wang Lin shouldn't have been able to feel anything in his soul form, but he was feeling pain all over his soul, as if there were countless insects devouring him. This feeling stayed with him. Even when he absorbed the first part of the inheritance back then, he didn't have this feeling. Little by little, he lost control of his soul. Part of it flew out in thin lines and eventually surrounded him to form a cocoon. The cocoon formed by his soul glowed blue like the ice crystals. In fact, it looked just like a slightly larger ice crystal. While this process took place, Wang Lin's soul entered a state of chaos. He had experienced this feeling before, when he first absorbed part of the inheritance. Even after experiencing it once before, the first time could be compared to a trickling stream, while this time it was like a raging river. He felt like a leaf on the raging river, helplessly being swept with the ups and downs of the rapids. Every wave would make his pain worse. Suddenly, he saw a light in front of his eyes. Soon, a familiar scene appeared before him. There was an empty space with countless specks of light glowing before him. This scene Wang Lin had seen before. Upon seeing the scene again, he suddenly gained a bit of understanding. The moment he gained that little understanding, the pain that he had been experiencing disappeared without a trace. Soon after, a feeling of numbness immediately began to spread from every part of his soul. The countless chants, techniques, and memories moving in his soul finally calmed down and completely integrated into it. Slowly, Wang Lin felt his soul move forward, and those specks of light became larger and larger. Eventually, they became giant planets. Soon he saw the large body of the ancient god. Wang Lin already knew that the youth he saw before was the ancient god 2C when he was a child, and the giant before him, who was the size of a planet, was the adult 2C. 2C's face looked very normal. The only exception was that there were 8 stars in a circle between his eyebrows. In addition, his skin was very rough and contained countless cracks. However, the cracks were barely visible. They were hard to notice if you didn't examine 2C very carefully. But after carefully observing him, there were countless cracks. His skin looked like a cracked shell. At this point, 2C's eyes were bursting with light, staring at a planet in the distance with a thoughtful look on his face. Soon after, his large hand lightly reached out and made a grabbing motion, causing that planet to shatter into dust and disappear among the countless specks. From the dust cloud flew out a golden light. With a wave of his hand, the golden light changed directions and flew toward 2C. Soon, the golden light landed in his hand and became a golden nugget. The object was clearly some sort of material. It looked like gold but wasn't. It was stone but not stone. It had sections of black lines on it. While holding it, 2C made another grabbing gesture with his other hand and another planet exploded. And so, just like that, after an unknown amount of time, more than 30 planets had been destroyed. At this point, many different colored materials lied in his hands. Next, both of 2C's hands moved, and all of the materials fused together. He became focused and recited some chants that fused into the material. Soon after, he closed and reopened his eyes. The moment he opened them, the 8 stars on his forehead started to spin, as if they were alive. The stars shot out rays of golden light into the material. After a long time, a square pyramid that glowed with rainbow colors appeared in his hand. This square pyramid gave of a look of majesty. A feeling of being able to destroy the world escaped from the pyramid as countless vortexes appeared near it. Wang Lin's soul felt a sucking force when he saw the pyramid. He had a feeling of terror in his heart as he nervously looked at it. 2C looked at the pyramid and shook his head with a look of pity on his face. He grabbed it and examined it some more before throwing it at a planet. It disappeared into the planet. 2C sighed. His body moved, and after a few steps, he disappeared into the void. Wang Lin witnessed all the events that had just occurred. 2C was clearly trying to create a device. After using more than 30 planets as resources, Wang Lin would expect the square pyramid to be some sort of legendary artifact, but he would never have expected 2C to only look at it for a bit, then throw it away because he wasn't satisfied with it. If such a treasure landed in the hands of a cultivator, then that person would be almost unstoppable. He stared at the planet that the square pyramid went to and secretly sighed. As for the process of refining the treasure, Wang Lin saw it all. Although he didn't know what materials or chant 2C used, Wang Lin believed that once he absorbed all of the blue ice crystals, he would know it all. After ancient god 2C left, he clearly felt his soul begin to disappear from that place. Soon all of his soul disappeared from there. At the place that held the inheritance of knowledge, besides the 93 blue ice crystals, there was a blue cocoon. Soon countless cracks appeared on the cocoon. Countless colorful lights peered out from the cracks. As more and more cracks appeared, the colorful light became more and more intense. Soon, with a cracking sound, the cocoon broke open. A half-transparent figure that emitted colorful light appeared from the cocoon. The person was Wang Lin. Wang Lin opened his eyes and looked down at his body. His eyes revealed a questioning look. He could clearly feel that after absorbing the blue ice crystal, not only did he gain more memories, but his soul went from an almost completely illusionary state to this half-transparent state. After contemplating a little, Wang Lin tried to move his soul, but his current body immediately collapsed and spread out into the surroundings. Wang Lin moved his soul again, and once again it fused back into that half-transparent state. He pondered silently for a while, then waved his right hand and formed a mirror made of the ice crystal. After glancing at the mirror, Wang Li suddenly quivered. He stared at the mirror, unable to utter a word. From the mirror, he could see the half-transparent figure. Although it was half-transparent, he could still see its features. It contained a very common-looking face. Wang Lin just stared at the mirror. His face revealed a very complicated emotion. He thought that one day he would be able to regain his old body. He had forgotten how many years it had been since his body was destroyed by Donghua Yuan, but he had never forgotten about the body that was given to him by his parents. Every time he remembered it, his heart would fill with hate for Donghua Yuan. After a long time, Wang Lin sighed, and his mood was calm again. He moved his soul and quickly surrounded another blue ice crystal. The extreme pain from before appeared again. This time, Wang Lin was prepared and he remained calm. All the information bursted into his soul and was absorbed by him. Shortly after, his soul became unable to withstand it any longer. It collapsed and soon surrounded him in that oval cocoon again. The empty space filled with countless specks of light appeared again. This time he observed the ancient god refining a pill. It was made using the spiritual energy of countless planets. This pill, in Wang Lin's eyes, was extremely rough. It looked like a ball of mud that was releasing a horrifying amount of spiritual energy. But no matter how you looked at it, it didn't look like a pill. After 2C took the pill, the cracks in his body became much thinner, and between the cracks appeared countless patterns that emitted a very mysterious atmosphere. With the ancient god's movement, the patterns created an illusion and looked as if they were alive. When the giant cocoon broke again, Wang Lin's body became a bit more solid. Time slowly passed. Wang Lin continued to absorb 2C's inheritance of knowledge. After absorbing one ice crystal, he would move on to the next. When the 34th ice crystal was absorbed by him, his soul was solid. No matter how hard you looked, you couldn't find any difference between his soul now and a real body. As for his hair, it was still white like before. Wang Lin took a deep breath and began to carefully examine his body. No matter if it was his sense of touch, smell, sound, or taste, all were the same as a real body. Gradually, Wang Lin's heart became filled with more and more doubt. All he did was absorb the ancient god's inheritance of knowledge. Why would his soul turn into a body? This body, aside from not having a core, was exactly the same as a normal body. Wang Lin pondered a little and cut his left arm. From the wound, red blood dripped out. While staring at the blood, Wang Lin finally understood that he had really recovered his old body. He closed his eyes, and after scanning his soul, he found that there were no changes to it. Within his soul, the circle of bright lightning around the core of the soul devourer spun, and every rotation sent out waves that expanded his soul. Within his soul, no matter if it was the heaven-defying bead or the G realm, everything remained the same. After he carefully explored his body, he opened his eyes and tightened his fists. Wang Lin didn't need any time at all to get familiar with the body his soul formed, since this was, after all, his original body. When he moved his fist, Wang Lin's heart was filled with joy. He raised his head and his eyes became cold. He said, "Donghua, you destroyed my body back then, but now I have managed to reform it. Once I reach the nascent soul stage with this body, I'll kill my way to Zhao and kill the entire Teng family. This hate can only be calmed by the blood of your entire family. Only the souls of the entire Teng family can calm my heart." Wang Lin's eyes lit up. When he first arrived in this place, he didn't expect there to be 94 ice crystals. That disrupted his original plan. He originally planned to absorb the inheritance of knowledge and find the ink stone needed to make the restriction flag, then return to his body and leave the land of the ancient god that he had been trapped in for so many years. If everything went according to his plan, then this time Wang Lin's harvest would have been great. Not only did he manage to learn the art of restrictions, he also learned the method for making the restriction flag and managed to obtain Hunchback Meng's and Ancient Emperor's bags of holding. Of course, there was still that beast trap and the 20 top quality spirit stones. If you include the 10 instruments as well, then he really did have a bountiful harvest. In addition, there was still the more valuable inheritance of knowledge. But after finding out that there were 94 ice crystals, Wang Lin became much more cautious. If he could enter this place, then others could as well. But after waiting for a long time, no one else came. It was clear that some change happened. More importantly, the place where Wang Lin hid his body was also where all of his bags of holding were. But that place was between the rifts, so he was not too worried about its safety. But if his body was without a soul for too long, then there might be complications. However, since Wang Lin formed a new body, he finally relaxed a bit. As time passed, Wang Lin's speed in fusing with the ice crystals became slower and slower. On the 57th ice crystal, after Wang Lin broke out of the cocoon, there was a faint star between his eyebrows. Wang Lin quietly sat crossed-legged within the cocoon. He closed his eyes. After a very long time, he opened them again. They exuded a mysterious light. Although the Wang Lin now looked like that youth from Zhao all those years ago, the atmosphere he emitted now was completely different. Him now, with his white hair flowing, gave off the feeling of an extremely dangerous stranger, just like a savage beast that caused people's hearts to grow cold. The star on his forehead appeared between his eyebrows after the 57th ice crystal. The moment the star appeared, it felt as if mind was struck by lightning and became clear. He clearly remembered that on the ancient god's 2C's forehead there were 8 stars. He remembered that no matter it was refining a treasure or a pill, they all required some mysterious power from the stars. But the stars on 2C's forehead were red, and the star on his head was only a faint outline. In fact, if you didn't look at it carefully, you couldn't even see it. Even though he didn't know how to get the rest of the stars on his forehead, Wang Lin believed that once he absorbed all of the ice crystals, he would have an understanding of it. Although Wang Lin didn't know much about the star, after absorbing more than 50 ice crystals, Wang Lin gained an understanding on why his body reformed. The ancient gods focused on refining the body. Every ancient god used all of the spiritual energy they absorbed to refine their body. As a result, even if they were ancient gods, their bodies would reach a limit and stop becoming stronger. At that point, there was a need to expand the body, otherwise one's cultivation would stop. Only by expanding the body would one be able to reach higher cultivation. It could be said that the larger the ancient god's body, the more spiritual energy could be stored in it. Once the limit was reached, the ancient god's body would go through reconstruction. This could be considered reaching a new stage of cultivation. Each ancient god would experience countless body expansions, and also countless body reconstructions. The more they experienced it, the stronger they became. And after each reconstruction, the ancient god's soul also increased in size. For the ancient gods, there were no stages of cultivation. There was only the soul and the body's strength. The inheritance of knowledge that Wang Lin had absorbed contained the lifetime memories of 2C. Even though 2C died in an early adult stage while practicing the flowing ink transformation divine technique, he had experienced body reconstruction 8 times. Each body reconstruction was an unforgettable experience for the ancient gods. After all, each reconstruction was a step to becoming stronger. Before, Wang Lin only absorbed a small part of the inheritance, so there wasn't much change. After entering this area, he completely absorbed one of the 94 ice crystals, and the ability of reconstruction automatically started. Therefore, Wang Lin's body began to reform, using his soul as the core and his memory as the template. To Wang Lin, undergoing the process of body reconstruction wasn't anything special. In fact, if anyone else received the inheritance, they would go through the same process. But when Wang Lin's body reformed, it allowed him to recover his original body. Although this body looked very normal compared to ordinary cultivators, it was much stronger. If Wang Lin could experience 8 reconstructions, then his body would be like the ancient gods. After understanding all of this, Wang Lin came to a wild conclusion. Maybe the 8 stars on 2C's forehead had to do with his 8 reconstructions. If that was really the case, then that would explain why there was a star on his forehead. After all, his body had reconstructed once. But according to Wang Lin's analysis, his body's reconstruction wasn't complete. Otherwise, why would the star on his forehead still have no color and remain so faint? This was all Wang Lin's speculation, because he didn't have that memory yet. But he believed that he would soon have the answer. After absorbing 57 ice crystals, the broken pieces of chants, techniques, and memories were starting to become complete. This caused his soul to become very chaotic. Sometimes Wang Lin's soul would become confused, sometimes he would believe he was 2C, and sometimes he would remember that he was Wang Lin. This chaotic feeling caused his heart to feel a strong sense of doom. Despite 2C being dead, and there not being any chance of being possessed, Wang Lin believed that if he absorbed all of the inheritance of knowledge, if one of them wasn't properly handled, he would really think that he was 2C and forget his real identity. Because of this, Wang Lin had slowed the speed at which he absorbed the inheritance. Only after he had completely absorbed one ice crystal would he move on to the next. As a result, the chaotic feeling in his soul lessened by a lot. Although it still happened sometimes, Wang Lin was able to maintain his identity. Although the speed had gone down, the key was to be steady. Wang Lin wasn't in a rush and slowly absorbed the inheritance. Time flew by. Wang Lin had completely lost his sense of time in this place. After every time he came out of his cocoon, his soul would be in a state of chaos for an unknown amount of time. Wang Lin clearly remembered how many ice crystals he had absorbed. After the 70th ice crystal, they took several times longer to absorb. As Wang Lin absorbed more ice crystals, they contained more and more memories, and the first thing that Wang Lin would do after breaking out of the cocoon was check his body. As he absorbed more and more of the inheritance, his speculation was confirmed. The star on his forehead represented the amount of times that his body had undergone reconstruction. After every ice crystal he absorbed, the color of the star on his forehead would become more clear. And at the same time, Wang Lin could clearly feel that with every ice crystal he absorbed, his body underwent an adjustment. After readjusting 70 times, Wang Lin could feel his body's toughness. It was as if he was following the steps of the ancient gods. Although from the outside his body looked completely normal, the inside had undergone tremendous change. After absorbing 70 ice crystals, his body was extremely robust. Wang Lin's eyes lit up. He speculated that, in its current state, his body would be able to withstand blows from a spirit-forming stage cultivator. Time passed. Today, within the space that contained the ancient gods' inheritance of knowledge, there were no more blue ice crystals remaining. The only thing left was a giant dark blue cocoon. The cocoon was not normal. There were countless cracks on its surface. If one looked carefully, then they would say that they looked like the cracks on 2C's skin. This giant cocoon had been here for countless years with no sign of breaking. The entire surrounding area felt like it was silenced by some mysterious force. There had been no change in these countless years. Wang Lin's body laid inside the cocoon. His heart had long since stopped beating. His entire body lied in there in a death-like state. His soul was in complete chaos. The time that it was taking to absorb the last ice crystal had been much longer than the last 93 combined. His soul was submerged in the ancient god's memories. He experienced the events from the birth of the ancient god 2C to when he decided to practice the flowing ink transformation divine technique, as if he was there himself. After experiencing all that, Wang Lin even had a feeling that he himself was an ancient god. This type of confusion was something that Wang Lin had been avoiding, but now on the last ice crystal, this feeling burst forth. Because of this, Wang Lin's soul remained in a state of slumber. After an unknown amount of time, a cracking sound could be heard from the giant cocoon. Shortly after, continuous cracking sounds emitted from the cocoon. The countless lines that covered it began to grow wider. Soon, with a pop, the entire cocoon broke open. A body emerged from the cocoon. That person had black eyes and white hair, with a very ordinary face, but very tyrannical atmosphere. Currently, the person's eyes were closed, and his was stopped. He presented no sign of life. After a long time, his eyes opened. His eyes felt like they contained endless power. Wang Lin slowly let out a breath. Then he examined his body. After absorbing the 94th ice crystal, he could clearly feel how strong his body had become. Even though he hadn't done any testing, he was confident that this body would help him reach his goal and bring him many benefits. Recalling when he was absorbing the last ice crystal, his heart still felt shocked. If he didn't take precautions before going into it, like when he absorbed the 50th ice crystal and slowed down the rate he was absorbing the ice crystals in order to create a solid foundation, then after absorbing the 94th ice crystal, he would have lost himself and would have ended up becoming a lunatic who thought he was 2C. Because of the solid foundation that he had built, he was able to withstand the storm and keep his identity. Wang Lin's eyes lit up. The memories he obtained were almost complete, but his heart still felt a trace of doubt. According to the memories that he had received, they contained the moment of 2C's birth to when 2C started practicing the flowing ink transformation divine technique, but not of when he was practicing the technique that led to his death. Wang Lin pondered for a while. He carefully scanned the surroundings. He had a wild guess that there weren't only 94 ice crystals but not too much more. It's just that, why weren't the remaining few here? Wang Lin frowned and pondered it for a while, but gave up thinking about it. Both his hands moved to form a seal. Then he spoke in the ancient god's language and said, "Open." Immediately, a curved rift opened before him. Within it were 3 black glowing stones. Wang Lin grabbed the 3 stones with his right hand. As he stepped forward, ripples spread out from under his feet. He took 3 steps and his body disappeared from this place. Those 3 stones were the key material for making the restriction flag. Within a rift in the ancient god's meridian, there were countless restrictions placed in a way that formed a ring around a certain spot, releasing a dangerous scent. A figure with white hair suddenly appeared outside the ring. After he appeared, he stared at the ring. After looking at it for a while, and confirming that there was no change, he walked forward. Those restrictions seemed as if they had lost their power because none of them activated at all. With every step, the nearby restrictions disappeared. As he walked to the center of the ring, all of the restrictions on the way disappeared. He was Wang Lin, and as for these restrictions, they were the ones that he himself had placed to protect his body and his bags of holding. Although he believed this place to be safe because it was not really within the meridian, but in the special space created from the memories of the inheritance, Wang Lin's personally was very careful, so he still left many safety measures. After entering the restrictions, his eyes landed on his old body and the bags of holding. His eyes revealed a look of regret. The body before him had already rotten. There were traces of spiritual energy released from the body's core formation. Next to the body were some bags of holding. Wang Lin let out a sigh. If he hadn't reconstructed a body after he received the inheritance of memory, then he would have to obtain another body. He placed his right hand on the chest of his old body. The lifeless body suddenly started to release thick spiritual energy. Soon, cracks appeared on the body's hands and feet, and continued to spread. As the cracks grew wider, the fluctuations of spiritual energy grew larger. Eventually, the body completely shattered, and a fist-sized core floated out of it. There were countless specks of colored dots scattered among the shattered body. Upon seeing the core, he felt a sense of familiarity. After all, this was the core that he had formed himself, and this connection wasn't something that time would cut. Shortly after, Wang Lin's right hand reached out and the core flew toward him. The moment the core reached his hand, it disappeared into his body and charged toward his dantian. Once it reached his dantian, it started to slowly rotate in place. Waves of spiritual energy washed over Wang Lin's body. He closed his eyes and felt his body. He reopened his eyes, stared at the remains of his old body. He hand-formed a seal as he growled, "Inferno flame!" As his words left his lips, the blue dots mixed in with the remains of the body came together to form a blue flame. Wang Lin opened his mouth and sucked the flame into his body. It disappeared into his dantian. Wang Lin waved his right hand and made the bags of holding next to the body fly one by one into his hand. Shortly after, a white light emitted from his hand and a black cloak appeared. After putting on the cloak, Wang Lin grabbed at the void created a rift. Without any hesitation, he walked into it. He appeared again at the place that held the inheritance of knowledge. Wang Lin took a deep breath and checked his surroundings. After making sure that everything was the same as before, he began to chant some very complex words in the ancient god's language. With the seal formed by his hand, a simmering light screen appeared before him. The words in his mouth acted like an invisible hand, expanding the light screen. Soon, the light screen became large enough, and the ancient god's image appeared on it. Wang Lin was very familiar with the pressure that ancient god 2C's illusion had, so his heart remained calm. After the image appeared, the 8 stars on 2C's forehead shot out 8 beams of light, forming an octagon-shaped whirlpool. Wang Lin stared at 2C's image and thought, "Land of the ancient gods, goodbye." In the Sea of Devils, the chaotic broken stars. It was a ring formed by many large broken planets. There was a mysterious force in this place. No matter if it was entering or exiting, one must face many avatars with the same cultivation as oneself. Only upon victory can one pass into or out of the mysterious ring. This place was also very dangerous, so as a result, not many people come here. 2 swords of light charged toward this place, one in front of the other. The sword of light in front was clearly dimmer. Inside the light was a young woman with her lips pursed and face pale. She was wearing greenish-red clothes, her waist was slim, and she looked very pretty. In the light behind, there was a middle-aged man with a square face and thick brows. His eyes were as big as bells. He had a mocking smile on his face as his cold eyes stared at the young woman in front of him. The sword under his feet was very stable. He was clearly not putting too much effort into this pursuit. As he stared at the woman, his eyes became more cold. These 2 lights, one behind the other, quickly closed in from the distance. The young woman looked ahead at the chaotic broken stars and an idea came to her mind. She had been running for months now, and for this past month, no matter where she ran, that person was always close behind her. If she hadn't used her master's secret technique to escape, she would have already been caught. But using this secret technique required too much spiritual power. After using it a few times, she couldn't afford to use it anymore. Under the stress, she panicked and didn't pay attention to where she was going. Without realizing it, she came to the chaotic broken stars. When she realized this, she wanted to change direction. But just then, that person caught up to her again. She was helpless, so she could only move forward. Soon, the 2 came closer and closer to the ring formed by broken stars. She knew in her heart that the person behind her wasn't using his full strength, but playing around with her, to pressure her to keep moving forward. She had to be careful to not enter the chaotic broken stars ring, but the distance to there was getting shorter and shorter. Qian Kuan was casually chasing her. He had his heart set on the item she possessed. If it were not for her suddenly using that escape technique a few times, he would have already caught her. But now, in panic, she ran herself toward the chaotic broken stars. It seemed as if even the heavens were helping him. Thinking about this, his smile widened and became even colder. Qian Kuan's gloomy voice slowly said, "Yun Fei, in front of you is the chaotic broken stars. In the Sea of Devils, the chaotic broken stars is a very dangerous place. As of now, no one has ever passed through it by relying on luck. Do you want to give it a try?" The woman's face became more pale, and the bitter feeling in her heart increased. When she was 5 feet away from the chaotic broken stars, she suddenly stopped and turned around. She looked at Qian Kuan with a bleak face. Biting her lips, she said, "Senior Junior here escaped to here by chance. Why must you kill me?" Qian Kuan's mouth twitched. The sword under his feet stopped 10 feet away from the woman. He shot one glance toward the chaotic broken stars behind her. He smirked and said, "I am only here on orders. You should blame yourself for taking something you shouldn't have." The woman laughed. She took out a piece of jade from her bag of holding. Looking at Qian Kuan, she whispered, "This is something that belongs to my master. How it is something I'm not supposed to take? Senior, within the enchanted palace there is a replica. Even if I take this, it doesn't affect the enchanted palace at all." Qian Kuan's gaze landed on the piece of jade. His expression was one filled with greed. His task was to kill this woman and take back the jade. There was a seal placed by the enchanted palace on this piece of jade. Qian Kuan knew that even if he were to get his hands on it, he couldn't use it, only return it. And this woman named Yunfei, although her identity was ambiguous, she could read this jade, otherwise, she won't have had the chance to steal it. Precisely because of this series of events, he didn't just kill her, but followed her closely. Qian Kuan darkly said, "I don't know if taking that jade would affect the enchanted palace or not. I just know that if I take it, it will benefit me greatly." The woman revealed a bold expression. She said, "Senior, if you have something to say, just say it, but do consider the importance of this piece of jade." Qian Kuan didn't say a word, but a hint of joy appeared in his eyes. He already knew that this Yunfei was the successor of the famous Qi Huang sect. Although the Qi Huang sect was destroyed by a mysterious force, this woman somehow managed to escape unharmed. Afterward, the woman who held the piece of jade containing the Qi Huang sect's most precious pill recipes was captured by the enchanted palace and was forced to be a concubine there. Now, after many years, she finally found the chance to run away with the piece of jade. Qian Kuan was at the mid-core formation stage. Although the line to the late stage was thin, his cultivation technique was very limited. He was afraid that he would never be able to enter the late stage. But if he could get his hands on this piece of jade and make pills with the recipes inside, then he would be able to enter the late core formation stage. The woman let out a heavy sigh. Without a word, she took out a blank piece of jade. After imprinting information on the jade, she said, "Senior, I'm finished imprinting. If you let me escape, this jade is yours." Qian Kuan laughed and said, "Good. First, hand over the jade. After I confirm the information inside, I'll let you leave." As he finished speaking, he started to move forward. The woman quickly shouted, "Stop!" She held the jade in her right hand. With just a bit of spiritual power, she could crush this replica. At the same time, she backed up 2 feet. While staring at Qian Kuan, she said, "Senior is already at the mid-core formation stage and I have only just entered the core formation stage. I'm 1 stage below Senior, so I can't help but guard against Senior not keeping his promise after getting the jade." Qian Kuan slightly frowned. His cold eyes stared at the jade in her hand and said, "What do you mean?" Yunfei took a deep breath and plainly said, "I'd like to ask Senior to back away 1,000 feet. I'll place the jade here. After I leave, Senior can come here and collect this piece of jade, or else I'll immediately crush it and commit suicide. Then Senior would have gained nothing." Qian Kuan revealed a cold smile. "What a joke. How would I know if the jade you give me is real or not? What if you tricked me?" At this time, neither of them noticed that, within the chaotic broken stars, was a 3-foot-long rift. Waves of black energy emitted from it. Yunfei's face hardened and was about to speak, but Qian Kuan continued to say, "I don't have time to waste with you. Hand over the jade and I'll let you live. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. As for the jade, I'll take my loss." As he finished speaking, he slowly floated forward. The distance of 10 feet could be traveled in a flash, but Qian Kuan moved slowly, because he was afraid of her unconsciously crushing the jade. Then he really would have gained nothing. Yunfei clenched her jaw. She threw the jade to the side and quickly escaped away from Qian Kuan. Qian Kuan suddenly started to move like lightning and chased after the jade. After catching up to it, he held it in his hand and scanned it with his divine sense, then immediately became excited. After laughing madly a few times, he found Yunfei, who was escaping. His eyes revealed malicious intent as he quickly chased after her. This time his speed was clearly different from before. It was several times faster. Although Yunfei was running away as fast as possible, she secretly kept tabs on Qian Kuan's movement with her divine sense. After seeing him catch the jade, she suddenly had a really bad feeling and started to move faster. But soon she started to despair. Qian Kuan didn't keep his promise but chased after her. Yunfei sneered in her heart. Qian Kuan, even if I die, if you follow that jade to refine pills, you will die miserably. All of this is your own fault. Then she sighed. She stopped moving and decided to stop her own heart. Qian Kuan saw that Yunfei stopped running and had given up on resisting. He let out a big laugh and quickly rushed forward. He said, "Since you gave me this piece of jade, I'll let you die in pleasure. Let me have a good look at that body and see what's so extraordinary about it that even enchanted master. If you properly serve me, I might even let you go." Just as Qian Kuan finished talking, his eyes suddenly fiercely stared toward the chaotic broken stars. His eyes were filled with astonishment, but that quickly turned to fear. Qian Kuan suddenly stopped talking. Yunfei stopped herself from stopping her own heart. She looked toward the chaotic broken stars. Her jaw dropped and she had a shocked expression on her face. She only saw that, within the chaotic broken stars ring, a rift somehow appeared. The rift was rapidly expanding. In the blink of an eye, it was already more than 5 feet wide. The rift formed an arc like the mount of a beast. This caused anyone who saw it to feel a chill in their heart. Within the Sea of Devils, there were only red rifts that appeared between the inner and outer seas, so the meaning of a rift here was deep. This rift not only emitted black energy, but was quite large, while the rifts that appeared between the inner and outer seas were only small rifts. But before Qian Kuan and Yunfei was such a large rift. The moment the rift appeared, Qian Kuan felt a tingling sensation on his head. He almost immediately wanted to give up killing Yunfei and escape from this place. Just as this thought surfaced, he immediately suppressed it. His eyes lit up as he stared at the chaotic broken stars ring. His heart calmed down. With the formation there, no matter how strong the thing that comes out of the rift is, it won't be able to come out of the ring, so there was no need to flee. At the same time, the rift suddenly started to grow. Waves of black light came out of it, along with many strange energies. Soon, a young man wearing a black cloak calmly walked out. This person had a head of white hair that flowed behind him, giving him an ancient feel, but his eyes revealed a ruthless look. The most eye-catching part was the dark purple star on his forehead. This purple star gave off a purple light. It felt like it was filled with demonic energy. Along with the black light from the rift behind him, he looked like a demon that just walked out of hell. The person didn't even look back. He waved his right hand and that large rift behind him quickly started to close. In almost the blink of an eye, the rift disappeared completely, leaving only the demon god-like youth. He stood in mid-air. His eyes showed signs of regret and looked through the chaotic broken stars ring and spotted Qian Kuan and Yunfei. Qian Kuan felt a sense of horror from the moment he saw the youth walk out of the rift. Because there was the ring between them, he couldn't scan the youth with his divine sense. However, even if the ring didn't exist, Qian Kuan wouldn't dare to scan that youth with his divine sense. In his view, if that person could walk out of such a large rift, then that person's cultivation level must have reached an unimaginable level. The youth should be at least nascent soul or even the mythical spirit forming stage. As a result, how could he dare to offend the youth? More importantly, he felt like the scene before him. He had heard of it from somewhere before, but couldn't remember where he had heard it from. When the white-haired youth looked at him, even though it was through the broken star, his legs grew weak and he wanted to run away, but he stopped himself. Qian Kuan knew that even if he ran, if the youth could get through the ring, then he would be able to catch up to him instantly, so running or not running was the same. In fact, running would just make the youth remember him more clearly. Besides, if the youth couldn't get out of the ring, then even if he didn't run, he was still safe. Thinking this in his heart, Qian Kuan suddenly stopped and clasped his hands. He respectfully said, "This junior is the Poison King's Enchanted Palace's 5th generation disciple. Qian Kuan greets senior." Yunfei's heart became weak because she had just had a near-death experience and then witnessed such a scene. Her conclusion was about the same as Qian Kuan, but in her mind she thought that if she ran, then she would be killed by Qian Kuan, but if she stays there might be a chance for her to live. After thinking about it, she respectfully said, "Junior is Qi Huang Sex 2Mo Yun. Greetings, Senior." The white-haired youth withdrew his gaze after glancing at them coldly. He looked toward the chaotic broken stars ring. After pondering for a while, he slammed his bag of holding and a small creature appeared in his hand. The beast had 3 pairs of wings on its back. Its clear eyes made it seem as if it were psychic. It immediately flew forward. With its wings beating, it quickly charged at the ring. Soon it arrived inside the ring. Shortly after, a broken fragment released a white light. After the light faded, a copy of the beast appeared. When the two beasts met, both released high-pitched screeches and started to attack each other. The white-haired youth frowned. He waved his hand and the little beast's body suddenly started to tremble. Its body formed a small tornado and flew out from the ring and landed on the youth's shoulder. With a move of his hand, the beast disappeared. This white-haired youth was Wang Lin. He had used the method left in the ancient god's memory to open up a tunnel to leave the land of the ancient god. After exiting the tunnel, he appeared inside the ring of the chaotic broken stars. If he wanted to leave, then he must pass the ring. From what he had heard from Duanmu and others' conversations, he had an idea of what the ring was like. He planned to use the same method he entered before to leave, but that transfer array was too complicated, and among the memories of the ancient god, for some reason, there was almost no information about transfer arrays. After thinking about it, it made sense. With how strong the ancient gods were, there really was no need to use transfer arrays to travel. They could easily open up a black hole and travel through it. Of course, this didn't mean that there wasn't supposed to be information on transfer arrays in the ancient gods' memories. Otherwise, why would there be that mysterious array in the fourth realm? If this was really true, then it was as Wang Lin had suspected. The inheritance that he absorbed wasn't complete. However, all of this was Wang Lin's speculation. As for whether or not any of it was true, no one could really know. Wang Lin pondered for a while. His eyes were filled with determination and he charged toward the ring. The moment Wang Lin entered the ring, although Qian Kuan's expression was calm, his heart started to tense up. This was not the first time he had seen someone charge into the ring. Many years ago, he saw someone who was at the nascent soul from the enchanted place charge into the ring. He died so miserably that not even his nascent soul managed to escape and was swallowed by the mysterious force. So when he saw Wang Lin charge into it, his eyes immediately focused. Yun Fei was even more tense than Qian Kuan. She had placed all of her hope of escaping death on that youth. She thought that if Wang Lin could make it out of the ring, then Qian Kuan would not act rashly. With the jade as a gift, she might have a chance. Although all of this might not work, it was a chance Yun Fei decided to take. The moment Wang Lin entered the ring, a few of the broken fragments quickly collided together. In a flash of white light, an exact copy of Wang Lin appeared in the ring. When the copy appeared, it let out a cold smile. It slammed its bag of holding and a black sword appeared. This flying sword was weird, it had many thorns on it. It was clearly Wang Lin's personal flying sword. Wang Lin scanned the black sword and was really impressed by the power behind the mysterious force, that it could even copy magical treasures. Even the crack created by Hunchback Meng was on there. This time, Wang Lin decided not to fight. He was just there to scout. After the copy took out the black sword, it let out a loud laugh and the sword flew toward Wang Lin. Wang Lin's mouth twitched. He slammed his bag of holding and took out the black sword as well. Immediately, two identical swords started attacking each other. Shortly after, Wang Lin let out a cold smile. His G-Realm Divine Sense suddenly moved and formed red lightning. At the same time, the copy's eyes also revealed red lightning. Wang Lin stared at the copy with a dignified look. He saw that the red lightning flashed a few times in the copy's eyes. Then the copy's eyes exploded and became fragments. At the same time, it seemed the copy couldn't withstand the red lightning's power either and exploded as well. Wang Lin's eyes lit up and he immediately began to ponder. Although he moved his G-Realm Divine Sense, he didn't attack with it, but only used it to test if the copy could even copy his G-Realm Divine Sense. Now he knew that although the ring's power was mysterious, it couldn't copy his G-Realm. Wang Lin revealed cold smile and walked deeper into the ring. According to what Wang Lin heard from Duanmu, this ring was 100 miles wide. After beating the first copy, one can travel 50 miles, then one must defeat 2 more copies, then one can travel 50 more miles and exit the ring. Qian Kuan's heart almost collapsed when that copy exploded. Wang Lin's ranking in his heart instantly soared to an unprecedented height. He could have never thought that the copy formed by the mysterious power would explode so quickly by itself. He could not imagine the technique behind it. Yun Fei's eyes became stronger. She stared at Wang Lin, who was inside the ring, thinking about how to ask him for help in a way that she wouldn't be rejected. Wang Lin easily moved forward, but only after he had moved 10 feet did the fragment release a white light again. After the white light faded, 2 more copies appeared. After the 2 copies appeared, one took out a flying sword and other took out a scroll. Wang Lin's expression remained the same, but his heart sank. Unless Duanmu lied, then it was because he had destroyed the first copy so quickly that it caused a change. But Wang Lin's mood did not change at all. He still remained cold and calm. The moment the 2 copies appeared, red lightning appeared in his eyes again and his G-realm divine sense came out again. This time the 2 copies didn't immediately follow and use their G-realm, but quickly started to use their treasures. Wang Lin's eyes lit up. Without any hesitation, he charged toward the copies. Before, he experimented with his G-realm. This time, he wanted to test how powerful his body had become after receiving the ancient god's inheritance and underwent reconstruction. Will the body formed by reconstruction be as strong as his memories showed him?